All right, Brother Abdulaziz, would you like to start?
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I welcome you all, and I'm so delighted. We are delighted to have you here with us. Of course, this is not the first event organized by ISIP, but of course, this is the first event to be organized by ISIP Regional Chapter. So we are more than excited, and we see your presence as feeling being honored, honestly, and we hope that we're going to benefit each other in this event. So without wasting much of our time, because I'm here with Brother Jamaluddin, who is the ISIP co-director, and I believe he has more and better things to say about what ISIP stands for. From there, we'll be able to deduce what the regional chapter is. And I wouldn't want to waste much of his time because Alhamdulillah is doing fine, and we're not even expecting him to be here today because of his ill health, but alhamdulillah is getting better. So he will do a little bit of introduction, and then he go into his lecture on introduction to Islamic psychology. I believe this will be a good grounding for everyone, both those in the profession and those that are interested in what is it about this Islamic psychology, because it's a big thing now. So without wasting much time, I will just invite Brother Jamaluddin to start the introduction and the lecture.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Abdulaziz. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salawat wa salam ala Rasulullah wa alihi wa sahbihi wa min wala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear excellent brothers and sisters from West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Gambia, Senegal, Mauritania, Mali, all West African countries. Please forgive me for not mentioning all of them. Also to all brothers and sisters who are joining us from all over the world, most welcome to this session. An honor to have you all with us. I want to thank first and foremost ISIP West African Organization Committee under the excellent leadership of one of the task force facilitators and a great colleague of us, Brother Abdulaziz. Also, the rest of the team, all excellent sisters and brothers from the ISIP West African chapter and Nigerian chapter, Ghanaian chapter as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for organizing this excellent event. So thank you so much, Brother Abdulaziz and rest of the excellent team. You guys are doing an amazing job. Of course, I want to thank Professor Salisu for being with us today in this inauguration session today. This is our first session that we're doing as we're establishing ISIP's West African chapter, which is such an honor, honestly. This is something we've been looking forward to for a long time, because West Africa is very important for the Ummah, not only when it comes to Islamic psychology, when it comes to Islamic thought. Many of our traditional scholars within many of the main disciplines within Islamic thought came from West Africa. And we know cities like Timbuktu were centers for Islamic education, where people from all over the world came to educate themselves when it came to Islamic thought and Islam in particular. So we have such a rich history from West Africa when it comes to the development of Islamic thought that we as Muslims all over the world should be grateful towards, and we should learn more from this tradition, both historically and in the contemporary era, and disseminate it all over the world. This is very important. Secondly, Nigeria, for example, is one of the biggest Muslim countries in the world. We tend to not think about that sometimes. You know, when we speak about biggest Muslim countries, we tend to think about Indonesia, Pakistan, India, and correctly so, these are big Muslim countries. But Nigeria is actually one of the biggest Muslim countries when it comes to population. So a big portion of West African population are Muslims. Also, when it comes to Islamic psychology, thanks to the excellent leadership of Professor Salisu, who we have such an honor to host today as our head lecturer, we have some of the pioneers in the field of Islamic psychology, both historically, but also in the contemporary era, under the excellent work and leadership of Professor Salisu, who are from West Africa. Professor Salisu is from Nigeria. And we're very honored to have him as part of ISIP's advisory board, both for the West African chapter and international as well. We will do a lot of lectures with him, both locally, regionally, and also internationally as well, because we have so much to learn from his excellent leadership and excellent scholarship, inshallah. Also, traditionally, there is a lot of great scholars that developed the field of Islamic psychology, both from the akhlaq tradition, which is the ethic and moral tradition of Islam, but also from the fiqh tradition, from the kalam tradition, from the tasawwuf tradition, and other Islamic disciplines who developed the field of Islamic psychology, the tib tradition, the medicine tradition, etc., from West Africa. So we're very honored to establish ISIP's West African chapter. And we're looking forward to work with all of you excellent brothers and sisters, whether you're mental health professionals or just people who are interested in Islamic psychology and Muslim mental health. We're really looking forward to work with you guys in further developing the West African chapter, fill the gaps in the local community and the region. You guys decide what we should do. You guys know best what needs, what are the needs amongst the Muslims. For instance, should we do lectures? Should we do resource sharing? Should we do different projects, outreach projects, awareness projects of speaking about mental health, etc.? It's up to you guys to decide, because different regions have different needs, and we as ISIP, the International Students of Islamic Psychology, we're very flexible. We try to tailor our initiatives according to the local needs. That's why we have local and regional chapters. This is very important, dear brothers and sisters, for me as your brother, as your fellow colleague, and also as the co-founder and director of ISIP to highlight that different countries, different regions have different needs. And that's why we try to fill the gaps according to the needs of the local community. So we usually do a lot of different things in ISIP. I will briefly tell you guys about what we do in ISIP and how you guys can be active, inshallah. And after that, I will do a lecture about the conceptualization of Islamic psychology. What is Islamic psychology? A very brief introduction. And after that, we will hand it over to our excellent scholar and teacher and murabbi, Professor Salisu, who will do a more thorough lecture than me, inshallah. All right. Before I start, I just want to say to all of you that I want to ask you for forgiveness. I'm still a little bit sick. I came back from Umrah 1 week ago, alhamdulillah. It was an amazing journey, subhanAllah. I met a lot of beautiful West African brothers and sisters in Umrah, actually. A lot of people from Nigeria that I met there, subhanAllah. Amazing. But coming back from Umrah, I got sick and I'm still recovering. So if my voice is a little bit shaky or if I cough a little bit, please forgive me. I'm trying my best to be at your service. So my sincere apologies. All right. So very briefly, dear brothers and sisters, and feel free to introduce yourselves in the Zoom chat as well. The Zoom chat will be open throughout the whole session today. So if you have any questions, if you want to connect with one another, if you want to connect with Brother Abdulaziz and rest of the excellent team of ISIP West Africa, feel free to do so throughout the chat. Brother Abdulaziz will also share some interesting information of how you guys can become active in the West African chapter of ISIP, inshallah. All right, Bismillah. So ISIP, the International Student of Islamic Psychology, we're an international movement who wants to further normalize and develop the field of Islamic psychology and Muslim mental health. We try to disseminate knowledge, share resources, and discuss best practices within the field of Islamic psychology. And we have over 12,000 members from over 90 countries and nationalities. So it's a very diverse international movement, dear excellent brothers and sisters. And we have over 24 local and regional chapters, expanding all continents all over the world. We just recently established our Maldives chapter, subhanAllah. And so we're very honored to represent ISIP in the Maldives. We have chapters in Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Philippines, also in the Oceania region, which includes Australia, New Zealand. And we also have in the Indian Pakistan subcontinent region, including, of course, India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan. We're also establishing our chapter in Bangladesh as well. In the whole Arab world, we have a chapter, ISIP Arabic. Also in the African continent, we have chapters now in West Africa under the excellent leadership of Brother Abdulaziz and rest of the team from West Africa. We have in Southern Africa, which includes South Africa, Mauritius, Zambia, etc. East Africa, we're trying to establish a chapter now, which will include Uganda, Kenya, etc. Horn of Africa, which will include Somalia, Tanzania, and other Horn of African countries. In Turkey, we have our chapter, ISIP Turkey. We have our Bosnian chapter. We have our Benelux chapter, which includes Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. Our German chapter, our French chapter, our Scandinavian chapter, which includes Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Iceland, and Finland. Our UK chapter, our Spanish-speaking chapter, our North American chapter, our South American chapter. So there is a lot of chapters all over the world. Why we have local and regional chapters, dear excellent brothers and sisters, is, as I mentioned earlier, is to fill the gaps when it comes to the needs in the local communities. Even though we have our international umbrella, we also want to fill the gaps because the needs might be different in different countries, different regions in the world. That's why we have our local chapters. Also because we don't want to do, lectures or circles of learning or halaqas or different support groups only in English. We want to do it in different languages as well. So for instance, we do a lot of resource sharing, dissemination of knowledge, support groups, Islamic psychology supervision groups, lectures, conferences, etc., research groups, also in Arabic and Turkish and Urdu and Malayalam and Hindi and in Spanish and in German and Dutch, and hopefully also in West African languages as well. I know that in West Africa, English is the main perhaps language, but you guys speak Wolof. I know some speak perhaps Mandinka or other local languages as well. So we're more than delighted to do initiatives in other languages as well. We do a lot of resource sharing, for example, but also a lot of initiatives when it comes to learning, circle of learning. And our movement is not only for mental health professionals, even though many of us are mental health professionals, also for just students, seekers of knowledge, parents, couples, you name it. Islamic psychology is a very broad field of knowledge. So it doesn't matter which background you have. If you're interested, you're more than welcome to join ISIP. We want to be a platform for you as well. And it's also quite exciting to have colleagues and members from all over the world because we can learn so much from each other's experiences. And there is a big diaspora actually that are living outside of Islam, right? If you can just mute your microphone. Thank you. We have a big West African diaspora actually. So we try to also invite the diaspora to join our initiatives, inshallah. So this is a little bit about ISIP. We have support groups, mental health support groups. We have Islamic psychology discussion groups. And we have Islamic psychology supervision group for mental health professionals who want to apply Islamic psychology in their clinical practice. We have refugee mental health support groups, revert converts support groups, disability support groups, you name it. We have over 70 task forces in ISIP who are working with different objectives. And ISIP is also a very transparent movement and organization, dear excellent brothers and sisters. So whatever idea you have, we're more than glad to develop them under your excellent leadership, inshallah. So if you have any ideas, feel free to pitch them to Brother Abdulaziz and rest of the ISIP West African team, and they will be more than happy to support you in developing this initiative in the West African country context. Our idea is also to have local chapters in West Africa. So we have our West African chapter, which will be our regional chapter, but then we will also establish local chapters in Ghana and Nigeria and other West African countries as well. This is also one of our intentions, inshallah. All right, that's a brief presentation of ISIP, the International Students of Islamic Psychology. I will allow Brother Abdulaziz to briefly, before I start my presentation of the conceptualization of Islamic psychology, this is a brief introduction into the field of Islamic psychology to excellent brothers and sisters. I just want to allow Brother Abdulaziz to share some thoughts about how you guys can become active in ISIP's West African chapter and which initiatives are in store for the future, and also to present the rest of the organization committee of our West African team of ISIP. So Brother Abdulaziz, feel free to take over for a couple of minutes, and then I will do my presentation, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan for listening, dear brothers and sisters.
Jazakallah khairan for the detailed explanation of what ISIP stands for. And as he has said, basically, we're still trying to kick off. We are seriously and actively looking for collaborations and participation from members from West Africa. Broadly, especially, we don't really have much issues with Nigerians. We are looking forward to partnering with lots of other countries in West Africa, namely Ghana, Senegal, Mauritania, and name it all. So what we are doing currently is to recruit a lot of our members and into the activities that are currently doing. Currently, what we have now, what we want to do in future is to look at how we are going to pick major languages, which is namely Hausa, Fulani, some of these languages, and we're going to be doing discussions in their different locality and how psychology is relevant to them. Because what ISIP stands for is more like a movement on how to understand Islam psychology, in a sense that it's going to become a standard in future of how Muslims will be working with their own psychology. So we also have a platform currently that you are more than welcome to join. I'm going to share the link to you now in the group. So you're welcome to join this group. And from there, you can indicate your interest to want to be a full member, to participate and to share your knowledge. More so, we have among us professors, scholars, and alhamdulillah, these are humble people. And so you're also welcome if you have more things to advise. Maybe you have some things you think projects we can embark on, or you think there are some things you can share with us, or you think you can even be a resource person for West Africa chapter. So in the course of presentation, I will share some of these links to us. And also earlier on, I shared, where I'm going to share again, a registration link to indicate your interest. And then I'm going to share the email address for ISIP. So you can always contact me directly. I'm going to share my contact as well. And we can pick up discussion from there, inshallah. But for now, what we are trying to do is to collaborate. So if you know of any organizations that we can collaborate, earlier on, Brother Jamaluddin had some meetings with Muslim Association of Psychology in Nigeria. And also we are looking forward to Triple IT and a host of other people we're trying to, organizations we're trying to connect with to see how we can organize programs and raise more awareness about Islamic psychology, inshallah. And from what we're going to hear from our professor today, we are also going to agree that we need more awareness about this. Alhamdulillah, he's a don in the field, and he has a lot to say, to tell us. Recently, I was listening to one of our lecturers in Malaysia. So I was talking to him about Professor Salisu, and then he told me that when he was undergraduate, that they invited professor to their school, and far back then he has been talking about Islamic psychology. So he's not a new person in this field. He knows what is going on in Nigeria, and he'll be able to tell us more. And so we are looking forward to a lot of collaborations. So I will leave this little introduction for now from Jamaluddin while I share some of the resource I just spoke about. Now over to you, Brother Jamaluddin. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brother Abdulaziz, for your information. And as Brother Abdulaziz said, if you guys want to join, feel free to connect with the West African chapter. They will be at your service. And thank you, Brother Abdulaziz, for all the excellent work you're doing. We're honored to have you as a colleague, and to the rest of the team of ISIP West Africa as well. We're honored to be with all of you. You're all doing an amazing job. So we have some of the leading scholars in Islamic psychology as part of our advisory board in ISIP, giving their full-hearted support, which is such an honor. And Professor Salisu is one of them. We're very honored to have him with us. Also, we have Professor Malik Bedri's family who support us. As you know, Professor Malik Bedri is the father of the Islamic psychology's contemporary movement. And he's a very important figure. And of course, he's also your fellow African brother. Originally from Sudan. So we're very honored to host some of the leading scholars in the field as part of our advisory board. So as Brother Abdulaziz said, if you have any organizations that we should collaborate with, we do MOUs with them, or if you want to join yourself to be part of the organization committee developing different initiatives, feel free to reach out to us. Your engagement will be crucial in developing ISIP's local and regional chapters, but also to normalize Islamic psychology. Islamic psychology is very important. it's a paradigm shift when it comes to speaking about psychology. And so we need to normalize it as a way to break the stigma of speaking about mental health as well. Because I do believe firmly that if we just introduce Islamic psychology to the people, then people will be more keen to gravitate towards understanding psychology from Islamic perspective, because then they will understand that psychology is actually very congruent to the Islamic paradigm.
Okay.
So I will start my presentation now, dear brothers and sisters. This is a brief introduction to Islamic psychology, inshallah.
This one.
This is just briefly about my background. So I'm a co-founder and director of ISIP, International Students of Islamic Psychology, co-founder of Al-Balkhi Institute of Islamic Psychological Studies and Research, which is ISIP's research center. So if you're interested in doing research or developing curriculums or working with translations in a professional way, feel free to join the Al-Balkhi Institute as well. We invite you to join if you're a PhD student or academical scholar or a mental health professional or an alim or alima, most welcome. I'm also part of the Shifa Institute, which is a center for Islamic psychology in Sweden and Scandinavia, where we offer counseling. And we're also in ISIP establishing online counseling services for those who want to get counseling from an Islamic psychological paradigm called Rafiq Counseling. This will be announced soon in all of our social media groups and WhatsApp groups. I'm also part of the Futuwa Nasheed Academy for Islamic Arts and Excellency, where we try to work in establishing fitri masculinity and sacred manhood and womanhood, inshallah. I'm a licensed counselor working with mainly brothers, but also sisters online, and I also studied social psychology and industrial and organizational psychology at Lund University in Sweden. I have a postgraduate diploma in Islamic psychology from the Cambridge Muslim College, and I'm trained in traditionally Islamically integrated psychotherapy, level 1 and level 2, at the Khalid Center in Ibn Khaldun University in the US and Turkey. Guest lecturer in Islamic psychology at the IOU, International Open University, and I'm currently doing a master's also in clinical psychology at Lund University in Sweden. My lecturing often is involved in themes such as Islamic psychology, decolonial psychology, alternative pedagogy, grassroots organizing, interculturality, strategic communication, etc. All right. What is Islamic psychology, dear brothers and sisters? So Islamic psychology finds its roots in the Quranic worldview and the prophetic example as embodied by our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Islamic psychology at its core is looking at the human being in a holistic manner and examines and approaches human behavior, motivations, emotions, and healing through an Islamic lens. Islamic psychology centers on the concept of fitra, the soul's connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and bringing the human being back in touch with the fitra for true well-being. So as you know, fitra, we're born into fitra, right? So fitra is our pure natural disposition. It's our disposition of being connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also to be in this pure state. If you compare, Islamic thought of fitra with the Judeo-Christian notions, our way of looking at our ontological reality is quite different compared to, for instance, the Judeo-Christian notion, where you're born with the sin, right? You're born into sin. We're not born into sin. We're born pure, in a natural, pure state. But then in dunya, we start to disconnect ourselves with our fitra. So part of our healing trajectory is actually to reconnect ourselves to fitra again, once more. This is part of our healing trajectory, all right? And as Islamic psychology, we're, basing ourselves in how can we reconnect ourselves to fitra again, to this pure natural disposition of tawheed, pureness, pure connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's oneness, and also to his divine names and attributes. The metaphysical components of the ruh, soul, aql, mind, nafs, lower self, or behavior inclinations as well, qalb, heart, are key components of influence and study in Islamic psychology. By the way, brothers and sisters, feel free to ask your questions in the chat and I will address them at the end of my lecture, inshallah. I saw that one hand is open right now, but we will take questions later on. Feel free to write them in the chat, inshallah. Islamic psychology is based upon the primary sources in Islam. So it's, all the knowledge is derived from the Quran and from the Sunnah. and also from the secondary sources, which is the works of our traditional scholars. So a lot of scholars historically have contributed to study the structure of the soul and the levels of the soul, how to bring the soul into a healthy state. So there is a lot of manuscripts developed by many scholars who contributed to the development of the field of Islamic psychology that we try to also revisit and learn from. Hence, we call them the secondary sources. But of course, all these works of the traditional scholars were also based on the primary sources of Islam, the Quran and the Sunnah. All right. There is different way of approaching Islamic psychology, dear brothers and sisters. One way is to work with Islamization of psychology, which is a top-down approach. And that is to filter Western psychology from an Islamic lens and use those things from other traditional psychologies that are applicable to the Islamic paradigm. This is a top-down approach towards Islamic psychology, or as they say, Islamization of psychology. The bottom-up approach is more the traditional indigenous approach towards psychology, which we call Islamic psychology. This is rooted in the Islamic paradigm, and this is rooted in the primary or secondary sources, as I mentioned before, primary sources being the Quran and the Sunnah, secondary sources being the works of our traditional scholars. Then there is a comparison model as well, where you can compare Islamic notions of psychology with other traditional notions as well. So these are different approaches in working, studying, and reflecting upon psychology from an Islamic paradigm. What does Islamization of knowledge mean? This is quite important, dear brothers and sisters, because this is a way to approach not only psychology, but all other disciplines that we're studying in different universities all over the world. According to Ismail Raji al-Faruqi, rahimahullah, Islamization of knowledge is to recast the whole legacy of human knowledge from the standpoint of Islam. And he actually recommended 7 steps of Islamization of knowledge. As it goes, he mentioned the first step in working with Islamization of knowledge is to be creating understanding and awareness of the particular domain that you're trying to Islamicize. For instance, psychology in our case. The second step is crystallization of Islamic thought, concepts, and methodologies. The third is to master the legacy. Master the legacy, have a mastery of the legacy, whether it's in different Islamic disciplines or, for instance, in the field of psychology. The fourth step is mastery of contemporary knowledge. So we need to know our traditional knowledge, but also the contemporary knowledge as well. The fifth steps is to establish textbooks and disciplines. The sixth steps is priorities of scientific research. Research is very important to brothers and sisters. That's why we as ISIP are establishing our research center, the Al-Balkhi Institute of Islamic Psychological Studies and Research, because we want to further develop new research in the field and fill the gaps, because there is a lot of need in doing, for instance, research in, for instance, social psychology from an Islamic psychological point of view, or other domains as well. And also the seventh step is preparation of academic cadres, scholarships, training grants, etc. When it comes to Islamization of knowledge, Professor Naqib al-Atas, rahimahullah, one of the leading contemporary scholars in the field of Islamic thought, he spoke about Islamization of knowledge as the deliverance of knowledge from its interpretations based on secular ideology and from meanings and expressions of the secular. And he was advocating a 2-step model with regards to Islamization of knowledge. The first step was isolation process, where knowledge should be freed from Western culture and civilization. That's the isolation process. The second step, after isolation, those existing body of knowledge should be infused with Islamic elements. So this is the model that Professor Al-Atas, rahimahullah, recommended to us with regards to Islamicizing knowledge. Now, let's move on and speak a little bit about Professor Najati. Professor Najati was an Egyptian Sudanese scholar who is actually a contemporary person to Professor Malik Badri, rahimahullah. also considered to be one of the pioneers when it comes to establishing Islamic psychology in the contemporary era. He believed that a critical step in building Islamic psychology as a discipline lay in deep knowledge of the Islamic intellectual heritage. To have deep knowledge, according to Professor Najati, served 6 important functions. So this is the 6 steps of Islamic psychology that Professor Najati advocated, dear excellent brothers and sisters. The first step was, it allows Islamic psychology scholars to utilize and draw upon contribution that span the course of 15 centuries. You know, Islamic psychology is nothing new. This is a field that scholars traditionally were contemplating, reflecting, and working upon, right? So we have 15th century, starting with the works of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then from the Sahaba and the Salaf and the Tabi'een until contemporary era, so much knowledge that we have produced. All right, so we need to root ourselves in this tradition. The second step is it bridges a historical gap frequently found in writings of modern psychology historians who tend to bypass the Islamic civilization. This is very important, dear brothers and sisters. If you read a lot of the psychology encyclopedias, for instance, Oxford University has this encyclopedia of psychology. Do you think that they're mentioning a lot of the scholars from Islamic world or the Muslim scholars who were researching or developing notions or knowledge within the field of psychology? I can tell you, honestly, it's not a lot of scholars that they are highlighting. This is because, as Professor Najati rightfully mentions, Western civilization has, for centuries, bypassed what the Muslim civilization contributed, not only to the field of psychology, but to all disciplines. And this is due to colonization. This is due to Eurocentrism and Westernification, and many other ideologies that brings about bypassing and diminishing contributions outside the Western realm. All right. So by us rooting ourselves in our tradition, this is a way for us to revive our notions into the contemporary era. It's also a great way to do dawah, brothers and sisters. Honestly, one of my teachers, Professor Süleyman from Turkey, he always says, Islamic psychology is a great tool for dawah. All right. And I'm sure you guys can do dawah in Nigeria and Ghana and Mauritania and Senegal and Gambia and other West African countries as well, because our psychology is so holistic. While Western psychology is very reductionistic, our psychology is holistic. I will share some thoughts about that later on in my presentation. So why, for instance, we are calling our research center in ISIP Al-Balkhi Institute is because Al-Balkhi, actually, Abu Zayd Al-Balkhi, rahimahullah, he was a Persian Sunni scholar who lived in the 9th century in Balkh, which is a city in modern-day Afghanistan, actually. He was an academical psychologist who is the father of what we call today cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, subhanAllah. Now, if you read all the CBT manuscripts today, they will not mention Abu Zayd al-Balkhi. But actually, Abu Zayd al-Balkhi is the father of CBT. So by calling the ISIP's research center Al-Balkhi Institute, we're connecting ourselves to our rich tradition of psychology and Islamic thought through the legacy of Abu Zayd al-Balkhi. And I really recommend you, brothers and sisters, to read his book, The Sustainers of the Soul, which was translated from Arabic to English by Professor Malik Badr rahimahullah. And IIIT has actually shared this book. So if you join our groups today, Brother Abdulaziz will share all the links in the Zoom chat. We will share the book with you guys as well. Actually, ISIP has a digital library with over 1,000 resources in the field of Islamic psychology and Muslim mental health, articles, books, etc. So if you become a member of ISIP, which is free of charge, everything we do in ISIP is free, by the way, brothers and sisters, so that everybody, no matter which social, economic, or background you have, can benefit from the sacred knowledge of Islamic psychology. So if you join, you can have access to our digital library as well. The third step Professor Najati spoke about is to build upon psychological knowledge that was produced by Muslim scholars in Muslim communities. This is very important, brothers and sisters. This is something that we in contemporary era call a culturally sensitive approach, religious sensitive approach towards psychology. What does that mean? What does that mean? That means that even if we work with Western psychology, you need to be culturally sensitive when you work with a diverse community of people. I live in Sweden. Sorry, let me just drink some tea. Please forgive me. I live in Sweden, in the north, very far away from West Africa. But actually, we have the same time zone, by the way. So, alhamdulillah, it's very easy for me to have meetings with Brother Abdulaziz and the rest of our excellent team because it's the same time zone. Sweden is a very diverse country. We have about 20% Muslims from many different countries. Even as Muslims, we're quite different. I mean, even though we're Muslims, we believe in the same things, the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Culturally, we're very different, right? It's quite different to be a Swedish Muslim compared to a Nigerian Muslim, because culture is also a factor when it comes to how we do approach our, practices, in the sense that, for instance, look at our Kufis, right? The Kufi is quite different and it looks in Nigeria compared to Malaysia, right? This is the beauty of Islam. Islam is not against urf. Urf means culture, all right? But what Islam says is that as long as the urf is applicable to Islamic paradigm, it doesn't contradict Islam, then it's good. It's good. So cultural things that are applicable to Islamic paradigm, we should be proud of. For instance, the diversity of Kufis. I mean, Kufi is something that we as Muslim have. This is something that we all have. But they could look differently. Even the hijab. If you look at sisters' hijab, the colors, the different ways are quite different culturally. Look at the architecture. If you look at the masajids, for instance, I love to look at the masajids in Timbuktu or in Mali, so beautiful. But the architecture is quite different than the Persian masajids, right? Or the Arabic masajids or the Turkish masajids. This is because when Islam was spread all over the world, it also allowed the cultural unique ways of living or architecture to be part of it, as long as it was applicable to the Islamic paradigm, to the Quran and the Sunnah. This is the beauty of Islamic psychology as well, because it's a diverse way. Different scholars approach Islamic psychology in different way. So we believe in diversity as long as we're united in the primary sources, in the Islamic paradigm, in the Quran and the Sunnah. That is what unites us, Tawheed, right? Fitra, Quran, Sunnah. But then from there's different interpretations, different methodologies. That's why we have 4 madahib and Ahl al-Sunnah, right? Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali, Hanafi, etc., right? This is the multiplexity. So unity in Tawheed and the primary sources of Islam, multiplexity in different ways of interpreting how to work with the science of the soul, which is psychology from an Islamic perspective, right? So we need to know the knowledge that was produced by Muslim scholars and Muslim communities so that we can offer culturally and religious congruent approaches towards mental health. Even Western psychology today speaks about culturally sensitive approaches. I mean, you cannot use Freud just like that with a Muslim, specifically his notions of, children's development phases. It's not congruent to the Islamic paradigm. You cannot use that, So you need to be very culturally savvy and understand the cultural context that we're working in. And that's why if we understand what Muslim scholars have produced for Muslim communities, this will help us. The fourth step, according to Professor Najati, he says that it exemplifies approaches exerted by Muslim scholars to reconcile Islamically driven knowledge and knowledge acquired from other cultures and tradition. So you know that our traditional scholars, dear excellent brothers and sisters, they actually studied other traditions' psychology as well. Our historical scholars, they used to study Greek thought, or Persian thought, or Indian thought, or traditional Chinese thought. They used to do that. Like the way we're studying Western psychology today, right? They used to do that. You know what the difference is, though? They started by studying Islamic thought first. Well, unfortunately, I speak only for myself. I started studying Western psychology first. We should do the opposite. First study Islamic thought, and Islamic psychology, and then start to study psychology or other thoughts. We're not against other traditions' thoughts. You know, our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what did he say? He said that knowledge is the lost property of the believer. Wherever the believer finds it, he should take it. He should use it. This is a hadith that our beloved Prophet mentioned to us. So this encouraged a lot of the traditional scholars to actually study other, traditions, including psychology and Greek thought. And what they did, they Islamicized the things that were applicable to the Islamic paradigm, because they were so rooted in the Islamic paradigm, in the Quran and the Sunnah. Many of our traditional Islamic psychologists, they were not only psychologists, they were scholars in tafsir. They were qadis, and they were fuqaha, faqih. They were Islamic jurists, etc. So they were already rooted in the primary sources of Islam, and they were all rooted in different traditional Islamic disciplines. And then they also studied Islamic psychology and ilm al-nafs, right? So when they were studying Greek thought, they filtered out the things that were not applicable to the Islamic paradigm, and they kept the things that were applicable to the Islamic paradigm. So we can actually know what we can use from other traditions by actually studying the works of our traditional scholars as well. It also allows the 5th steps for the development of a holistic understanding of human beings. This is very important. Islamic psychology is holistic, and I will speak more about that soon. And finally, the 6th step, it complements the psychological truths derived from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All right. This is one of my teacher, Dr. Rothman's conceptualization of Islamic psychology. I had the honor to study under Dr. Rothman. He's one of the leading scholars in the field of Islamic psychology. And I'm so honored to be his student. And also he's part of ISIP's advisory board. So we're very honored to have him with us. This is the way that he has conceptualized how we can look at Islamic psychology. And if you look at this chart, in the center, Islamic psychology focuses on the qalb, the metaphysical heart. All health, dear brothers and sisters, comes from the heart in Islam. All right. So there's a microphone that is open. You can just mute yourself, please. Thank you. Could you mute the person, please? Thank you. So the metaphysical heart is very important, dear brothers and sisters. That's where the center of the heart, the center of health is in Islamic thought, right? And what we need to do is to align our aql, our intellect or our thoughts. I mean, aql is much more than intellect and thoughts, by the way. So it's not the perfect translation. And our nafs, which is our behavior inclinations or our lower self, with our qalb. And within the qalb resides the ruh, the soul, which is our connector, our wasila towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's our link towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our ruh. So Islamic psychology centers on working with these 4 components, all right? With the aim of reconnecting us with fitra, our natural disposition, our pure state that we're born in. And we not only work with your well-being in dunya, we're also working with your well-being in akhirah. That's why we want to reconnect you to Allah, right? Because with Allah, you're looking at akhirah as well. Because we don't only live in dunya. We believe in a life after death. So as an Islamic psychologist, when you're working with clients, you're not only thinking about their dunyavi health, you're also thinking about their ukhravi health. This is very important, This is quite different than if you meet a secular psychologist who will only focus on your dunyavi health. All right? So it's about reconnecting to Allah. Now, from the behavior inclinations, the nafs and the lower self, that's where the waswas from shaitan comes in, right? That's where and that's why we try to work on that, breaking the waswas. OCD, for example, from a religious perspective, we believe that OCD is something where shaitan comes with waswas. For instance, saying to a client, "Did you do your wudu properly? Maybe you should do it one more time." As Islamic psychologists, we try to speak with our clients and speak. This is the waswas from shaitan. If you want to know how often you should do wudu, then follow the sunnah. That is our template of a healthy way of doing wudu. We also try to work with the different levels of the soul, right? So underneath, to the right of the chart, you see that the nafs al-amara bil-su is the nafs that is inclined to evil. That's the part of the nafs which is very, connected to be open to listen to the waswas of shaitan, for instance. And as Islamic psychologists, we try to support our clients in elevating themselves and strengthening their nafs al-lawama, which is the reproachable self. Nafs al-lawama is the nafs, part of the nafs that actually has the ethics, that actually tells nafs al-amara what is right or wrong, right? So it's important to have a strong nafs al-lawama. And when you have established a nafs al-lawama into a strong disposition, then you can elevate yourself to nafs al-mutma'ina, which is the serene soul, the serene self, which is very much connected to fitra and connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you can do this through different, spiritual practices like jihad al-nafs, fighting your nafs, or tazkiyat al-nafs, purifying your nafs. And some of the disciplines that developed Islamic psychology, like tasawwuf, which is spirituality, or kalam, which is in a sense theology / philosophy, or fiqh, which is jurisprudence, or akhlaq, which is Islamic ethics. They try to study different ways of working with the science of the soul. So from the tasawwuf tradition, you can find a lot of ways of working with the metaphysical heart, purifying your intentions, purifying your nafs. There's a lot of manuscripts that different tasawwuf scholars developed in that field. From the kalam tradition, you can understand, for instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how we should, understand the ontological and epistemological realities of Islam. From the akhlaq tradition, which is the Islamic ethics, you worked a lot with, character reformation. How can you bring balance in your character? How can you do tahdib al-akhlaq, which is refinement of your character? Taking away the muhlikat, which is the vices, and adding the munjiyat, which is the virtues. How can you be a virtuous man or woman? And a lot of the akhlaq scholars worked on this field. On the fiqh tradition, you also could see fiqh as part of psychology, in the sense, for instance, maqasid al-sharia, which is the objectives of sharia. And we have 5 objectives of sharia. One is to preserve your aql. So one of the objectives of sharia is to preserve your aql. It's important to have citizens in the society that had healthy aql, healthy cognitions, healthy state of mind. The second was actually nafs, preserve your nafs, your ego, your well-being when it comes to your nafs, your behaviors, your ego, yourself. And then you had other objectives like, for instance, nasl, which is your lineage. And all these, objectives are also very much connected to psychology as well, So different scholars were studying psychology and bringing more knowledge into the field of psychology from different Islamic disciplines. It's interesting when it comes to speaking about virtues. Islamic psychology is about balance. We as Muslims, we should be proud of our tradition, dear brothers and sisters. We should be very proud of our tradition. You know why? Because Islam is about balance. It's the deen of mizan, balance, homeostasis, they say in Latin. For instance, we do believe that there is a place for anger. Actually, some other traditional psychologies, they say, take away anger, it's a problem. We actually believe that anger and all other emotions and ihsas that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us are God-given. They are good if they are balanced. So in the akhlaq tradition, it was all about working to bring about your character disposition into a state of ihtidal, mizan, balance. We're not rejecting aggression, but we're not embracing it purely either. We're refining it so that you can find it in a state of balance. Imam Ghazali, rahimullah, one of the leading scholars in Islamic psychology, he was speaking about qadab, anger, in a very interesting way. He was saying, for instance, that, and I'm just paraphrasing now, so this is not, I'm not fully quoting, but he was referring to qadab in the sense that a person who does not have any anger, that's not good. You know, then you become what? A coward. I will give you an example. Imagine if somebody's coming into your house and, you know, wants to do some robbery, wants to rob, take all of your belongings, you know, everything. And your wife is there as a man, let's say. Your wife is there, your children are there. As a man, should I just go into the bathroom and lock myself in? No. I need to protect my family, right? Now, I shouldn't, now, Imam Ghazali also said you shouldn't be just purely with aggression, because then you become not mindful of your actions. That's toxic aggression, right? Okay, I'm just going to go down, and he has like machine guns. No, okay, just be a little bit smart, all right? Maybe you should find a way, you know, or maybe speak with him. I don't know. Like, it's about balance. Now, a person who is in balance with his anger is a person who is courageous. All right. So anger, when it's refined and balanced, is actually a virtue, because then you become courageous, or as we say, shuja. So we as Muslims, and we who work with Islamic psychology, when I work with my clients, because I utilize Islamic psychology in my clinical practice, dear brothers and sisters, I actually never say, I never look at my clients if they're a little bit aggressive, thinking I should get rid of the aggression. I try to bring them into a state of balance, because then you become courageous, but then you need to control your emotions. This is very important, brothers and sisters. I always say to all my clients, you should be the master of your emotions. You shouldn't let your emotions master you. But if you become a master of your emotions, that's where your emotions can become virtues instead of vices. So this is important for me to mention, that Islamic psychology is about balance. This is why Islam is the deen of fitra, natural. It's a natural way of living. We're not repressing our urges, we're just putting them into balance. How do we know what is balanced? By following the Sharia, the will of Allah. Sharia is the law of Allah and will of Allah. So through Sharia, we know what is balance. You see what I'm saying? Through Sharia, we know what is balance. So Allah knows all of our deficiencies, all of our strengths, and that's why He gave us Sharia for us to, by following Allah's will and law, we know how to come to a state of balance and how to be connected to fitra in a balanced way. So, for instance, when it comes to interaction with the opposite gender, Allah, Islam doesn't say that's not allowed. It's actually a virtue if you do it in marriage, right? You know, according to Sharia, right? While if you look at other religions, for instance, if you want to be a virtuous person as a Buddhist, and I respect all Buddhist brothers and sisters, but you know, we're Muslims, so we have differences of opinion. This is not to disrespect people from other religions, of course. We do believe in interfaith dialogue and respecting people from other religions and cultures, of course, but we are also Muslims, and we do believe that our religion is haqq, is the truth, right? So we should be proud of our religion. And by the way, even though we're proud, we can always, work with others from other traditions or cultures or religions as well, including Western psychology as well, because, there is hikmah in all traditions, as long as our scholars mentioned, like Professor Najati, we filter it according to the Islamic paradigm. Now, in the Buddhist tradition, a monk is a virtuous person. But the monk, he doesn't marry, he never marries, he's never, understand? So to be a virtuous person, the ideal virtuous person in Buddhism, even in the Judeo-Christian tradition, is to live in celibacy. This is not the Islamic way, because this is not fitri, this is not natural. All of our Anbiya, all of the prophets, all of them, they were married. They were married. Look at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was married. He had children. So to live a natural way is actually healthy as long as it's congruent and according to Sharia and to the will and law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why Islam is the deen of fitra, the deen of normality, the natural way of living.
Sorry to
Even,
interject, Jamaluddin.
yes.
We have less than, although the time is up now, but maybe you can round up.
Okay, I will wrap it up. I will wrap it up, brother. Thank you for highlighting time. I'm so, I'm so excited about Islamic
I know
psychology.
when you are into it, you want to give it up.
Thank you, brother, for highlighting that. I'm so sorry for going over the time. So I don't think that I need to do more of my presentation, actually. I have a lot of more to speak about. I think I mentioned that Islamic psychology is interdisciplinary in its nature. Quran and Sunnah is what we root ourselves in. All the scholars wanted to understand the Sunnah of Allah, the systems and structures in all of creation, and the concept of our soul. The prophetic tradition also encouraged scientific endeavor. As I mentioned, the word of wisdom is the lost property of the believer. Wherever he finds it, he is most deserving of it. And this created a cohesion amongst a wide range of specialists from different disciplines. In contrast to Western psychology, different schools at odds with each other. We actually, even though some of the scholars were not always approaching psychology in the same way, they always respected each other. And when Islamic scholars refuted each other's theories, they did it with husn dhan, good opinion of each other. Hence, they were not involved in character assassination or were dismissive of their opponent's work. Rather, they engaged in today's terminology, peer review and fact-checking, which is a common routine in contemporary scholarly work. We were the ones, brothers and sisters, who established peer review and fact-checking. The whole aspect of silsila or, sanad, chain of transmission is to keep fact-checking in place. So Islamic thought and Islamic psychology is based upon all these academic approaches that today is standard in academia. All right, brothers and sisters, I won't be taking too much of your time. What I will suggest, Brother Abdulaziz, is that I will do part 2 of my presentation next time, inshallah. We will do another session for all of our beloved colleagues, brothers and sisters from West Africa, inshallah. So I will be with you guys again. This is just some of the scholars who contributed to the development of different aspects of psychology, philosophy. We have Ibn Sina, Al-Kindi, child psychology. We have Al-Tabari, cognitive therapies, Abu Zayd al-Balkhi. In the tib tradition and medicine tradition, we have Al-Razi and Ibn Sina, psychotherapy, Al-Razi, sociology, Al-Farabi, etc. So you have a lot of scholars who develop different scholarly work within different fields of psychology. And as I mentioned, tasawwuf, spirituality, fiqh, jurisprudence, tib, medicine, and akhlaq are the disciplines that help to shape what today is called ilm al-nafs. But Islamic psychology as conceptualization of the human being could be found in all Islamic sciences as well. So I'm just explaining a little bit more about fiqh, what is tasawwuf, what is tib, what is akhlaq as a discipline who developed the field of Islamic psychology. I speak about mukhlikat and munjiyat, as I mentioned, about bringing our character traits into balance. A little bit about takhliya and tahliya, to take away bad aspects of ourselves and bring in good aspect of ourselves. So I'm speaking a little bit about how to adorn your character, bringing in about ihsan and excellency. And then I compare Islamic psychology with modern psychology and coming with some constructive criticism of modern psychology, which is unfortunately very behavior reductionistic and rationalistic and scientistic, that they only look at empirical accounts and rejecting the metaphysical, while Islamic psychology actually integrates empirical accounts with metaphysical approaches as well. The Cartesian dualism and how that affected our way of looking at psychology today, how the Cartesian dualism separated the intellect and the body and the soul, distinguishing intellect and body and dismissing the soul completely, which is something that we see in modern psychology. Even though psychology etymologically from the Greek rooting means the science of the soul, it's not the science of the souls today. It's the science of the cognition, aql, and the behavior inclination, nafs today. They have rejected the soul. So I speak a little bit about that. I also speak about allopathism, that psychology today is very medical. When you go to psychologists today in West, it's often that you get medication. If you go to a psychiatrist, rather than working with the root problem of the disease, it's also very much function on the behaviors as well. So I'm trying to just speak more about this and speak about some other approaches in psychology in West today, which is actually more congruent to the Islamic paradigm. You have the third wave CBT and positive psychology, which actually is more holistic and is more applicable to Islamic paradigm. So that's good. So I'm doing some comparison between a top-down approach of understanding Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is very interesting. Actually, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is quite congruent to the Islamic paradigm, but he doesn't have self-transcendence as part of his hierarchy. That's how we can add that if we want to Islamicize his hierarchy of needs. So I'm just showcasing that a little bit. And yeah, this is my presentation.
All right.
If you have any questions, dear brothers and sisters, feel free to ask them now.
Thank you.
After that, I want to thank you all. Please forgive me for any shortcomings in my presentation. If anything good came out of it, it's all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all the mistakes are solid in mind. And thank you, Brother Abdulaziz, for telling me about the timing.
We're very grateful.
To all questions, inshallah.
We would like to have you next time, of course, because a lot of things, we are glad for the exposition. A lot of things you need to explain more. Especially on the last one that you mentioned, Maslow theory, and I was listening to, or I was reading his biography, and he later reflected on the last point that there should be self-transcendence, which can actually be equal to what we are talking about. Islamic is talking about something beyond this world, transcendence, like being altruism and doing sadaqah and all that. That he reflected on his point that the last one should be changed. So that's just a reflection. So I'm very glad some of the things you emphasize on the importance of Islamizations and the contribution of modern scholars, Raj al-Faruqi, Professor Nakib Attas, Najati, and all, and the works of Dr. Abdullah Rofam. So inshallah, we'll be glad to have you next time, inshallah, really, because a lot to be said and a lot to ask about the top-down approaches, the secondary approaches, and the comparison. I think I have only one question here for you, so that if you can just answer that, so that we don't keep Professor waiting. The question here says, can Islamic psychology be scientifically studied like study of the brain? I am blindfolded to the building blocks of Islamic psychology, i.e. nafs, ruh.
Brother, may I just ask? I know Brother Amir, he's an amazing brother.
Okay.
I will answer this question to him directly.
All right.
If it's possible, if we can have questions from West Africa, because this is, I know Brother Amir is not from West Africa.
Okay.
If we have some brothers and sisters from the West African context, first and foremost, because this is a West African initiative.
Okay.
Maybe we can start.
If anybody asks, because I cannot read any question here. So if you have question, you are free to unmute if you want to ask question, please. And if you want to type, please do so. I can read them out for you. Dear brothers and sisters. And inshallah, the presentation will be made available, but we'll be glad if you can register through the link, then we will contact you from the information you provide to us.
So I'm looking at Brother Amir's question, and then brothers and sisters from all over the world, you're more than welcome to ask questions. But because this is our inauguration of West Africa, we already do a lot of international thing, specifically to all of our West African brothers and sisters. Feel free to also ask questions about ISIP or the presentation. So Brother Amir is asking, can Islamic psychology be scientifically studied like the study of the brain? Yes, of course. Of course. Okay. I mean, it's just to utilize the same methodology. I mean, Ibn Sina rahimullah, he was doing empirical studies. Al-Razi rahimullah, he was doing empirical studies. But there are some things that we need to be mindful about. We cannot look at empirical studies in the way that, brother, are you sharing your, okay, yeah, you're sharing.
Professor, I think.
Okay. So when we speak about empirical approach, Imam Ghazali rahimullah, he actually said something that we need to be very mindful of. That empirical approach is important in all sciences besides the metaphysical ones. When it comes to the metaphysical ones, you cannot use the same approaches as empirical approaches in West. So he always says that he was for all empirical studies, and all this is besides the metaphysical ones. In the metaphysical ones, we do believe in the unseen. We do believe in al-ghaib. And how we study that is through the Quran and the Sunnah. That's where we study that, you know. That is our matrix for, and that's the matrix for everything. Everything we should do should be congruent to the Quran and the Sunnah. But yeah, we're open to empirical studies. And we were actually the ones as Muslims who developed the whole way of working and studying empirically different sciences. For instance, medicine. So yeah, definitely. And we need more empirical studies when it comes to interventions. When we use Islamic psychology interventions, how does that affect our clients? We need more studies of that, research about interventions, So right now, Al-Balkhi Institute with one of our great colleagues.
Here,
Sorry?
There's a question there from Dr. Sharifa.
Okay.
I look forward to, my question is, how do we begin to shift from the way we were trained, that means the paradigm shift, Western contemporary paradigms, to adopting an Islamic paradigm? Any reading we can start with?
Brother, we see your screen. If you have some things that are perhaps you don't want to share, yeah, I think that's better. Also, it seems like your battery is going off, brother. So maybe you should just put the charger in so we don't lose your presentation.
Okay, that's Professor, yes.
Yeah, my question is, how do we begin to shift from the way we were trained in Western contemporary to adopt an Islamic paradigm? So I think that the shift comes with rooting ourselves in what our traditional scholars did. And from there, try to understand what is the things in our studies that are congruent to the Islamic thought. Because it's not about rejecting your studies that you have done, Dr. Sharifa. It's not about rejecting the knowledge that you have. Because Western psychology has a lot of good things as well that we can utilize. We're not against Western psychology at all, but we want to keep the things that are congruent, So it's about root yourself in the Islamic paradigm, root yourself in the tradition of psychology from Islamic perspective, root yourself in the way that our traditional scholar approached the science of the soul. I recommend all of you to read Professor Malik Badri's first book, The Dilemma of the Muslim Psychologist. It's a very good book in understanding the dilemmas that we're facing as Muslim psychologists. He wrote this 50 years ago, but it's still very relevant today, actually. So the shift comes when we root ourselves in what defines our notions of psyche, our notions of psychology. As I mentioned earlier, Western psychology only addresses the aql and the nafs. What we do, we address the ruh and the qalb as well. Western psychology works for the well-being for you in dunya. We also add akhirah. So just to bring this about in your awareness is a good way of embodying a holistic approach towards health and well-being. And also to always speak about fitra, in the sense that fitra is what we want to reconnect our clients with, our pure state of well-being, that we're born in the pure state of well-being. And this is something that all of us, no matter how far off we are from connecting with our fitra, have the potential. So we as humans have a good potential. This is the view of Islam. So we don't pathologize people. We actually look at sickness as purification. We actually look at the sick as those who are closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests those that he loves most. Look at some of the Anbiya, some of the prophets that were tested more than many of us. And the prophets are those who are most beloved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. So this is just some ways of answering Dr. Sharifa's question. Thank you for an excellent question, Brother Amir and Sister Sharifa. Jazakallah khair.
Yeah. I wish you complete recovery. And also, we must be very grateful to you for even coming up to do this, because I know you are still recovering from your health. And inshallah, we hope to have you once again to complete the presentation.
Inshallah, brother. I just wanted to thank you, Brother Abdulaziz, one more, and thank you, brothers and sisters, for listening. We have a lot of brothers and sisters from all over the world, which is such an honor. So thank you for joining us from South Africa, from UK, from Malaysia. ISIP is for all of you. And we hope that you guys will join more of the West African initiatives so that we as non-West Africans can learn from our West African scholars like Professor Salisu. Thank you also, Professor Salisu, for joining us, and looking forward to listen to you and learn from your vast amount of knowledge. Please forgive me for any shortcomings. And if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat, brothers and sisters. An honor to be with all of you. And thank you, Brother Abdulaziz, for your amazing work. Jazakallah khairan.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I don't want to waste much time. I'll just go, apologies to Professor. So let me just quickly read to us his profile to us, so that he can start his lecture. Speaker, the main key speaker today, Professor Salisu Shehu, is a university administrator, an academic international international repute. Is an household name for most northern Nigerian academics, an educational psychologist by training, a religious leader, and a traditional title holder. He is presently the Vice Chancellor of Al-Istiqama University, Sumaila in Kano State. He was a former national coordinator of the Nigerian office for IIIT, that's International Institute of Islamic Thought. He was Deputy Secretary is currently, Deputy Secretary General of the Nigerian Supreme Council of Islamic Affairs and Executive Secretary for Islamic Forum of Nigeria, IFN. He was the Pioneer Dean, School of Continuing Education, Bayero University, Kano, and former Director of the Center for Islamic Civilization and Interfaith Dialogues, CICID, Bayero University, Kano. He is a member also the Board of Trustee of Al-Ansar University, Maiduguri. He's also a member of highest and most prestigious body of educationists in Nigeria, the Nigerian Academy of Education, NAE. He's a professor of education psychology, as mentioned earlier, and has written extensively in the field. Some of his works appear in the national and international reputable journals. He has served in various capacities and held several states and national assignments, such as member of Presidential Advisory Committee on Prerogative Mercy from 2005 to 2010. He was a member of Equal Education Opportunity Committee of the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board, that's JAM, from 2006 to 2017. He was Commissioner, Kaduna State Judicial Commission of Inquiry into clash between the Army and the Islamic movement of Nigeria, 2015 to 2016, among other responsibilities which he held in Kano, Bauchi State, and at national level. Moreover, Professor Salisu is one of the Jumat Imam of Bayero University, Kano Central Mosque, and a member of University's Mosque Committee. His research includes Islamic educational psychology, developmental psychology, child development, comparative education, epistemological integration of knowledge, open and distance learning, critical issues in education and society, critical social theory, peace, education and conflict resolution, social justice and good governance, adolescence and dynamics of youth development and empowerment. He has traveled widely across Africa, Middle East, and Europe. The countries he visited include Saudi Arabia, Burkina Faso, Malaysia, Senegal, India, Ghana, Libya, USA, Tanzania, Kenya, Sudan, Pakistan, Uganda, Turkey, Egypt, Benin Republic, Togo, Tunisia, Bangladesh, Indonesia, South Africa, and a host of other countries. In traditional leadership climb is the Walin Tafawa Balewa in Bauchi State. I don't know if I pronounce that very correctly. He can be reached at, okay, I'm going to share that later on. So let me leave the stage for him to present. Dear Prof, you are most welcome, and kindly accept my apology for keeping you waiting. So do you want me to share this link for you, or you can go ahead with that? Because I see that you're trying to share from your end.
I have already started sharing the screen.
Okay, please, you need to put it on screen, presentation mode.
Professor Salisu, just your battery is on 2%, just so you know. Perhaps you want to put it in charger.
Yeah. Is it okay?
Yes, but have you taken care of the battery so that you don't go off in the middle of presentation?
Yeah, actually, I will just switch off to another device.
Okay.
But I have to switch off to another device. Sorry.
Okay, it's fine. I think it's better we'll give you time to switch to another device because so that
Yes, Professor Salisu, you can take your time. I think it's better because or else we will lose you and
we'd like to
maybe
hear you very well then. So,
I'm trying to
we can
get
take time to. We will wait for you, inshallah.
sure.
In the meanwhile, while Professor
Well,
Salisu,
it's not good to keep waiting. Let me begin the way it's available now.
Okay. But you have a spare ready, sir?
No?
Do you have a spare computer ready?
Yeah. I have my phone.
Okay, you can go ahead. In any case, I'll help you share this slide, inshallah.
maybe we can do
All
like
right.
this, Professor Salisu. Brother Abdulaziz could share your slide and you can just do the lecture from the phone.
From the phone, yes.
Yeah.
All right. But I'm sure before it goes off completely, the charging cord will be brought.
Okay, good. That's fine.
Inshallah.
Okay,
Yes.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Jazakallah khair.
Bismillah.
Okay. I'm trying to connect on the other device.
I think
So let me
I just accepted you now. You came
just
in.
begin the screen sharing from your own end.
Okay.
Brother Abdulaziz, you can begin the screen sharing.
Don't do that now.
In the meanwhile, brothers and sisters, participants, if you have any question for Professor Salisu, feel free to write them in the chat, inshallah, and we will address them in the end. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, Bismillah. You can start. Can you see the screen, Professor?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Yeah, the screen has not appeared.
Jamaluddin, can you see? Is the screen okay now?
I do see the screen. Is it from you right now? Are you sharing the screen, Brother Abdulaziz?
I believe it is from Abdulaziz.
Okay.
Now I see the
Yes.
screen, but I don't see the presentation, Brother Abdulaziz.
The Abdulaziz, okay. Please begin the screen sharing.
Okay, hold on, I'm trying to. Which one is currently, okay, let me just stop everything and share again. Hold on, please. Okay. All right. How about now? How is
Not,
it now? Is it okay now?
It hasn't, yeah, okay, yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Bismillah.
Can I go ahead?
Please, yes, go ahead.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my brothers and sisters. Particularly Seyed Jamaluddin, who has just finished a very enriching presentation, very wonderful one. Jazakallah khair. I should also thank Brother Abdulaziz for effectively coordinating this lecture. I apologize for the lapses from my own end.
Recording in progress.
Go ahead. Please go ahead, Professor. Oh, I think we lost him.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
I was just apologizing for the lapses when my connection got off again.
Okay.
I believe Brother Abdulaziz, being from West Africa, is quite aware of our own condition and situation.
Yes.
But maybe Sayyid Jamaluddin, I'm apologizing to you. Our networks here are not perfect as you have it there.
Alhamdulillah, I explained to him earlier before, and he understands this.
So these kinds of disappointments may keep on coming from time to time. but we will try to manage it the way it is, inshallah.
Sure.
Now, secondly, a lot has been said about me. I hope I will not disappoint you people. And especially Seyed Jamaluddin has high expectations from me. Please don't be disappointed with my very poor presentation. And I also apologize to all our listeners who are with us. My presentation is going to complement the presentation that has just been made by Seyed Jamaluddin. Actually, it was my bad luck. I was to make the first presentation, but Seyed Jamaluddin has done it, and he has taken away some other important aspects of my presentation. I thank him for that very enriching presentation once again. My topic is Islamic psychology, textual foundations, and historical development in Nigeria. That means that I would want to present, like Seyed Jamaluddin was saying in his presentation, that the sources of Islamic psychology are actually.
You are muted, Prof. Okay.
I mean, foundations of Islamic psychology from the Quran, especially. There may be some hadiths that I may bring along the line, but I will concentrate on the Quran. And then secondly, I will try to make an overview of Islamic psychology here in Nigeria. So the outline of my presentation is going to be like this. There is going to be an introduction. Then I discuss what I call basic facts, basic concerns. And thereafter, I dwell on critique of the philosophical foundations, frameworks, and paradigms of modern psychology. Then after that, I present the Quranic outlook of psychology. That's the textual foundations of psychology from the Quran. Then I undertook an overview of Islamic psychology in Nigeria. So in the introduction, I have made the point that psychology is as old as man. I have tried to go back to the roots, and I tried to discuss the inception of psychology and its historical evolution and metamorphosis. So like I said, psychology is as old as man because man's curiosity to know about himself is innate in him, is inherent in him. Like Al-Hashmi has put it, as men, we are all interested in understanding the different changes that we experience when we feel joyful, when we are sad, when we're contented, when we're anxious, when we're jealous, altruistic, when we forget or we remember, when we love or we hate a certain person or thing, and so on. Now, this curiosity, which is inherent, has been with man ever since his creation. Therefore, from this perspective, you can say that psychology is as old as man. That is to say, psychology as an attempt by man to know himself and to know his fellow humans is as old as man himself. However, the first purposeful attempt at studying man that is known in human history, it is put here, could be traceable to the times of the Greek philosophers. So from a curious, unintentional, and less purposive attempt to understand the human psychic reality, the interest to study man developed into a relatively more formalized, purposeful, and deliberate endeavor. And it began with the study of the soul, traceable to Plato. This purposeful study of the human psychic reality may be said to have started at the times of the so-called classical Greek philosophers and specifically traceable to Plato. Plato had made postulations, or rather speculations, about the human soul, and that is the earliest known in human history. So psychology, therefore, can be said to have begun as a branch of philosophy. It began as a branch of philosophy, and therefore it used to be called philosophical psychology. But then psychology kept changing its space of history, of interest in its different phases of historical evolution. It has kept on changing from the study. It began as a study of the soul during the time of Plato, and then it then changed its sphere of interest to study of the mind, and it continued to metamorphose from one area of interest to another area of interest. Like it is put here, at early times, psychology concerned itself with the study of the soul. Later, it concentrated on the mind. It still continued to metamorphose at one time or the other, up to the present era of exaggerated and pervasive empiricism, which is championed or epitomized by behaviorism. Woodworth in 1948 made a symbolic description of the metamorphosis of psychology. That is metamorphosis of psychology from the Western perspective I've been talking. He said psychology first lost its soul, then its mind, then its feelings, then its consciousness, then its unconsciousness, and only its visible behavior is now reserved for it. Now, this symbolizes the kind of trend that psychology went through, first beginning as a study of the soul, then later becoming a study of the mind, psychologists concentrating on studying the human mind, and then they later concentrated on studying the feelings of man, his consciousness and unconsciousness, psychoanalysis, and then behaviorism. So behaviorism, you can say, is the last bus stop. In much more clear terms, Al-Hashmi himself summed up the chronic problem of modern psychology in the following way. He said the basic problem of modern Western psychology is that it does not regard man as a whole in all his constituent dimensions. You could remember Seyed Jamaluddin is talking about the fact that modern Western psychology doesn't care about studying the soul. It's not interested in studying the spiritual dimension of man. It's only interested in studying human reasoning and the human rationality and human senses, sensory perception and sensory experience. So he said it does not regard man as a whole in all his constituent dimensions and psychic phenomena. Rather, each stage in the history of psychology has singled out one aspect of the human psyche and devoted complete attention to it, ignoring other aspects. Such bias was the result of the diversity of cultures and orientation of psychologists. Its consequence was the appearance of numerous dissimilar designs and concepts, all of which cannot be true, nor can any single one be true. The problem with psychological studies has been, and still is, their failure to comprehend accurately, profoundly, and soundly, and profoundly, all aspects of human psyche and maintain the balance among the different aspects of
Yeah, Prof, I think you need to unmute your mic. Your mic is muted. Okay. Yeah, it's okay now.
Are you,
Yes, yes.
am I back?
You are back, yes.
Thank you. So like I was saying, this reductionism, this narrow approach is rooted in a worldview that is itself a reductionist worldview. This is the Western materialist worldview that is, reductionist in its ontology, in its explanation of ontological reality, and also in its explanation of epistemology. This is a worldview that is one-eyed. That is, it is only looking at this world. And therefore, according to this worldview, the only reality is matter. Matter is the only real existence. Anything that goes out of the scope of material existence, this worldview considers it a myth, is not a reality. And this is the actual reason why modern psychology dismisses the study of the soul, because the soul is intangible, is immaterial. It dismisses concern about human spiritual disposition because it's immaterial, it's intangible. You cannot, situate it within the realist, paradigm, which only considers matter as the only real existence. Therefore, knowledge, as far as this worldview is concerned, is rooted either in atheism, that is the total rejection of God, or agnosticism, or humanism. These are different strands of secularism. So the entire paradigm of modern psychology is the secularist paradigm. And the secularist paradigm is either the rejectionist, the atheistic, or the agnostic, or the humanist.
The mic is muted again. Hello, Prof. The mic is muted. Okay, he's back now.
Okay?
Yes, yes.
So this conceptual crisis about the real nature of man and his tendencies has posed a challenge to contemporary psychologists. And it was, as it was succinctly put by Alexis Carrel, man is still unknown, and our knowledge about ourselves is still primitive and partial. Now, because of this problem, modern psychology has failed to present the correct and true conception of man. And therefore, this is not a settled matter in modern psychology. It's not a settled matter that modern psychology has actually presented a correct conception of man. And if it is not a settled matter, then it is therefore necessary to add other dimensions to psychology. And this is why Islamic psychology is imperative. We need to bring another dimension, or we need to create a paradigm shift. Beyond the reductionist approach, we need to add another dimension that will make it complete. And this is the way I look at Islamic psychology. Like it was said by Seyed Jamaluddin, it is not about rejecting whatever is produced in the West. It's about filtering it and adding up the Islamic dimensions to it, which will complete it. So the whole business of Islamization of knowledge, if I will take us back again to his presentation, is not about totally rejecting what is presented in the West. That is erroneous. It's as if you're saying that the bath water should be thrown away with the baby. No, it's about taking the baby and throwing the bath water. It's about looking at Western intellectual heritage and filtering it with Islamic principles and Islamic concepts and Islamic methodology, or you can say an Islamic, worldview in its entirety. Now, let us go back to some basic facts and basic concerns. Like I was saying, behaviorism is the last bus stop as far as the historical growth of psychology in the West is concerned. What do I mean by behavior? If you look at the English dictionary today, the simple definition of psychology is that is the science of human behavior. Because behaviorism has come to hold sway of psychology. And this is as a result of the fact that psychology as a behavioral science, like all other behavioral science, like science. Now, all these are offshoots of the natural sciences, the natural and physical sciences. And that is as a result of scientism, the worship of science. Because of the crisis that happened between the scientists and the church, and the eventual victory of scientists, science, or you can say modern science, proceeded on a godless plane. It got rooted in the Aristotelian realism, that reductionist worldview that reduces total existence to only matter, things that can be perceived by the five senses. If they go beyond this sensory perception, they are a myth. That is, metaphysical world is rejected by this reality. Now, because science has succeeded the way it has in human history, everything came to be identified with science, and everything had to be patterned along natural and physical sciences. And therefore, the fundamental problem of behavioral sciences is that they have been patterned along the natural and physical sciences. Now, I've tried to identify the meeting points between natural and physical sciences and behavioral and social sciences. The meeting points are that both are based on Aristotelian philosophy of realism. That is the materialist explanation of existence. The real existential matter is the only real existence. Both are based on the cause and effect paradigm within the materialist concept of existence. Cause and effect, like I said, within the materialist paradigm. That is to say, cause that you can physically identify, and effect that you can also physically observe. And this is within this reductionist, narrow approach to reality. So empiricism, therefore, came to be the dominant pattern of seeking for knowledge. Empiricism, whereby knowledge is situated within control and observation. That is logical positivism. So the aspiration of both natural and physical sciences and the behavioral sciences is objectivity, precision, accuracy, and exactness. So both aspire to be objective, both aspire to be precise, accurate, and exact. But there are pattern points. Behavioral sciences cannot exactly be like the physical sciences, because the physical sciences and the natural sciences deal with tangible physical objects or subjects of study, whereas behavioral and social sciences deal with intangible, immaterial objects or subjects of study. That is one. Number two, another pattern point is on the issue of universality and neutrality. natural and physical sciences could be more universal and could be more likely to be neutral and value-free, whereas behavioral and social sciences are very much relativistic, they are culture-bound, they are rooted in socio-historical experience. So the way the physical scientist, a physicist that is dealing with the length and breadth of an object, or that is dealing with the weight of an object, or that is dealing with the volume of some liquid, as the case may be, is dealing with tangible objects, and he can subject them to real control. It's very easy to subject physical materials to control and observations. But the behavioral sciences, in all their aspects and specializations, they deal with intangible things that cannot be subjected to physical control. But in spite of that, the behavioral sciences, have to be made in a pattern as if you are studying a physical object. And this is where the actual problem is. Another parting point is that it's not possible to have precision and exactness and accuracy and objectivity in the behavioral sciences and the social sciences like you can have in the physical and natural sciences. So while natural physical sciences can be more likely to be exact and accurate, the behavioral sciences are more prone to errors. They are prone to wrong conclusion and erroneous generalizations. What is the point I'm trying to make here is that where modern psychology got it wrong is that when it reduces the study of human behavior to only, overt behavior that can be controlled and observed, that is the so-called logical positivism, where everything is subjected to the paradigm of examining cause and effect within the material paradigm, the materialist paradigm, dismissing any other factor that is beyond that. That is where modern behavioral sciences in their entirety got it wrong. And because it reduces the source of knowledge to only human senses, human sensory experience, and human reasoning, revelation is dismissed or rejected as a source of knowledge. Therefore, modern psychology only depends on what comes out of experimentation based on examining the relationship between the dependent and the independent variable. When you do that and you come up with results, you can make generalizations. But like I said, Islam does not reject, let me make the point very clearly, Islam does not reject empiricism, but then you cannot explain everything within the empiricist paradigm, because we believe in revelation, and we believe that revelation is a primary source of knowledge. In fact, it's the primary, the absolute, and the ultimate source of knowledge. When you dismiss revelation, you cannot actually understand reality. When you dismiss revelation, you cannot arrive at real truth, because as far as Muslims are concerned, the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ as revelations present the correct description of natural phenomena, whether it is human or physical phenomena. Therefore, when you reject revelation, you are completely rejecting the most reliable, the most dependable source of knowledge, the most true source of knowledge, because human senses have limitations. Human reasoning has limitation. And if knowledge is only reduced to what comes out of human sensory experience and its interpretation by human reasoning, then man is likely going to get it wrong. Now, the issue therefore is that it's very likely that you may arrive at real facts, but then because of human limitations, certain things that may be considered as facts may just be mere misconceptions. They may be erroneous, and hence you need to compare that with revelation to affirm its factness or its truthfulness. What I'm saying is that modern psychology, like as a prototype of modern science, does not recognize revelation. But the Islamic psychological, the approach to psychology from the Islamic perspective is that revelation is our primary source of understanding or studying man. But then we can also undertake empirical studies. But the empirical studies have to agree with what is in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. If they don't agree, they must be rejected because they must be subject to error. But you cannot use any product of science to either affirm a Quranic verse or a Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that is authentic. That is to say, the revelation is the primary source of knowledge as far as we are concerned, while empirical studies are secondary sources of knowledge. You can only use the primary source of knowledge to affirm and confirm whatever is obtained in the secondary source of knowledge, but you cannot do the reverse. That is why Islamic psychology must be rooted in the Tawhidi epistemology. The Tawhidi epistemology, meaning that Allah is the source of the primary, the ultimate, and the absolute source of knowledge. And he has given description of natural phenomena. He has described human beings. He has described other natural phenomena. Now, science is about studying nature. And unfortunately, science is reduced to this materialist worldview. And therefore, it's very likely that in science, you can arrive at facts. And it's very likely also you can arrive at errors. Facts that are obtained in science will never contradict what is in the Quran and Sunnah. But then errors in science may contradict what is in the Quran and Sunnah. And then they must be rejected. They cannot be used to reject any verse or to reject any Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is the paradigm that we need to situate our study of psychology and all other behavioral sciences, including even the natural and physical sciences. And that is what Seyed Jamaluddin has been saying is missing as far as the modern approach to human psychology and to all other behavioral sciences are concerned. Now, therefore, Islamic psychology has become an imperative. The points I have tried to make are three: that it is an unsettled matter. The areas or the space of interest of psychology is an unsettled matter. The conceptual and methodological approaches in modern psychology are subject to crisis. And then thirdly, I have not made this point, why we need Islamic psychology, because of the fact I have made that behavioral and physical sciences are culture bound. They are a psychologist or any behavioral scientist, when he studies a human phenomenon, especially a psychologist, he emotes with the object that he studies. He emotes with it. He has his own perceptions. His emotions, his perceptions may influence the way he concludes and makes judgment. And then even the way he conceptualizes the study is subject to his own social historical experience and subject to his own values. Therefore, you cannot totally dismiss behavioral sciences from biases, from cultural influences. And that is exactly the point that was made by Professor Malik Badri, rahimahullah, in the dilemma of Muslim psychologists. To this extent, it would be erroneous for Muslims to rely on theories, psychological theories, psychological concepts and principles that are produced in the West that has a socio-historical experience and has a value system and a worldview that is different from the Islamic worldview, different from the Islamic value system. Now, psychological concepts and principles and theories that are produced there cannot, critically speaking, be absolutely universal, and they cannot therefore be absolutely applicable and generalizable to all other human societies, especially Muslim societies. These underscore the need for Islamic psychology. Having made these points, let us now look at Islam and psychology. And this takes me to the issue of discussing the textual foundations of psychology. But I should make the point that the Quran is not a textbook of psychology. It's not a textbook of psychology, but the Quran contains, a lot of facts relating to human psychology, which we need to study. Having made this point, I would want to say that there is a positive relationship between Islam and psychology. And this is perhaps the point that explains why right from the beginning, Muslim scholars have always been interested in studying human psychology and have made a great deal of contributions on human psychology. All the scholars that were mentioned by Seyed Jamaluddin might have been inspired and motivated by these facts about human psychology that are contained in the Quran and in the Sunnah of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, how do we demonstrate the positive relationship between Islam and psychology? This can be demonstrated in a number of ways. First, man in both psychology and Islam is a central figure. Islam, and particularly the Quran, man is the primary and central figure addressed in the Quran. And in psychology, man is the primary and central object of study. So you can see there is a positive relationship. Psychology studies man. In the Quran, man is the central figure. Man is the primary addressee in the Quran. This creates a positive relationship between Islam and psychology. And in psychology, even when animals are used for experiments, the purpose was to use the results as basis for explaining human behavior. So even when psychologists make use of animals to carry out experiments, it's not that they are particularly interested in the animal behavior, but they want to use the results of their experiment with those animals, because man shares certain instincts and certain tendencies with the animals. Therefore, even when animals are being used in experiments, the purpose is about trying to understand human psychological disposition. So therefore, psychology is primarily interested in man, and the Quran primarily addresses man. Man is the central figure in the Quran. This can be seen in a number of verses of the Quran. For example, in Surah Al-Infitar, Allah says, that is in verse 6, Ya ayyuhal insanu ma gharraka bi rabbikal kareem. Ya ayyuhal insan. It is man that is being addressed. Oh man, what has deceived you about your generous Lord? In Surah Al-Inshiqaq, the same thing. Ya ayyuhal insanu innaka kadihun ila rabbika kadhan famulaqi. In Surah Al-Asr, Allah says, wal asr innal insana lafi khusrin. In Surah Al-Insan, Allah says, hal ata ala al-insani hinun min ad-dahri lam yakun shay'an madhkura. Inna khalaqna al-insana min nutfatin amshajin nabtali faja'alnahu sami'an basira. In Surah Al-Rahman, Allah says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ar-Rahman, allama al-Quran, khalaqa al-insana, allamahu al-bayan. This is purely psychological. It is talking about language psychology, the development of language in human beings. Psychologists are interested in language development. So Allah says, خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ عَلَّمَهُ الْبَيَانِ. In Surah Al-Alaq, Allah talks about insan and about learning. الذي علم الإنسان الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم, and so on and so forth. This is one way of establishing or demonstrating the positive relationship between Islam and psychology. The second way of establishing the relationship between Islam and psychology, or the Quran and psychology, is that the Quran has invited us in several verses to study ourselves. Like it came in Surah Zariyat, verses 20 to 21. The Quran says, وَفِي الْأَرْضِ آيَاتٌ لِلْمُوقِنِينَ وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. There are many signs on earth for people of sure faith, and also in your own selves. Do you not see? Do you not see? Can't you see? Can't you study? Can't you observe? It's an invitation to study human self. That may be human biology, human anatomy, human physiology, and human psychology also. So the Quran has invited us to study ourselves, which necessarily includes the study of our own psychological disposition. Like it also said in Surah Al-Tariq, فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ مِمَّ خُلِقَ. Let man consider of what he has been created. خُلِقَ مِنْ مَاءٍ دَافِقٍ يَخْرُجُ مِنْ بَيْنِ الصُّلْبِ وَالتَّرَائِبِ إِنَّهُ عَلَى رَجْعِهِ لَقَادِرٌ يَوْمَ تُبْلَى السَّرَائِرُ, up to the end. Now you can see the Quran has actually invited us to study our own selves. And this study of our own selves, like I said in the beginning, includes studying our own physical disposition, biological disposition. It involves studying our own psychology, all aspects of our own psychological disposition. You study human memory, how superb is human memory and how information is processed in human memory. You study human perception. You study human personality. You study human emotions. You study human social dispositions, and so on and so forth. And of course, necessarily for us Muslims, you study the human soul. That is why several Muslim scholars have written about the human soul. For example, Ibn al-Qayyim has written a book, Ar-Ruh, Al-Had al-Arwah, Ila Bilad al-Afrah, and so on and so forth. Study your own selves. The Quran has invited us to study our human psychology. This establishes a positive relationship between psychology and Islam, or it has provided us a textual foundation for psychology. Another perspective of demonstrating the relationship between Islam and psychology, or the Quran in particular and psychology, is that the Quran has given us various descriptions of human psychological tendencies and psychological dispositions. For example, in Surah Al-Adiyat, Wal-Adiyat Dabha, Allah, that is chapter 100, Allah says, Inna al-insana li rabbihi lakanud, wa innahu ala dhalika la shahid, wa innahu li hubbil khayri la shadid. This is a description. That is to say, in terms of, love for material, man is aggressive, man is violent. This is a description of human psychological tendency. In Surah Al-Ma'arij, verses 19 to 23, Allah has also given us description of human psychological tendencies. Inna al-insana khuliqa halu'a. إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ. Now, this إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ automatically connects human biological, psychological, and spiritual dispositions. That is to say, when man is captured by his animalistic lust as embedded in his own biological dispositions, and also as embedded in his own psychological dispositions. But man can rise above those forces through spirituality. إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى صَلَاتِهِمْ دَائِمُونَ. This is the dimension that is missing in modern psychology. And perhaps Seyed Jamaluddin may wish to note here that this is the dimension missing in Maslow's theory of motivation. Because as far as Maslow is concerned, the entire basis of human behavior are psychological needs. Everything begins with psychological needs. But then here the Quran is telling us that yes, man can be weak before his basic psychological needs. Man can become captive of his own biological desires. But then man can rise above those biological desires through spirituality. And this spirituality is what is missing in modern psychology. I don't know whether this point is very clear. It has been made clear. Now in Surah Al-Anbiya, Allah says, "Khuliqal insanu min ajil." Man is hasty by nature. Man is hasty by nature. Another description of human psychological tendencies in the Quran. In Surah Al-Isra, Allah says, وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ عَجُولًا وَيَدْعُ الْإِنسَانُ بِالشَّرِّ دُعَاءَهُ بِالْخَيْرِ وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ عَجُولًا. In Surah Al-Ahzab, Allah says, إِنَّا أَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ عَلَى السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَالْجِبَالِ فَأَبَيْنَ أَنْ يَحْمِلْنَهَا وَأَشْفَقْنَ مِنْهَا وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانُ إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. Man is inherently selfish and ignorant. Inherently, this zaluman means selfishness, wrongdoing, always putting self ahead of others. In Surah Al-Kahf, Allah says, وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا وَلَقَدْ صَرَّفْنَا فِي هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ لِلنَّاسِ مِنْ كُلِّ مَثَلٍ وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا. Man is given to controversy, is inherently, argumentative. Allah says the same thing in Surah Yasin. أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الْإِنسَانُ أَنَّا خَلَقْنَاهُ مِنْ نُطْفَةٍ فَإِذَا هُوَ خَصِيمٌ مُبِينٌ فَإِذَا هُوَ خَصِيمٌ مُبِينٌ, and so on and so forth. Now, these are descriptions of human psychological tendencies in the Quran that puts the Quran in a positive relationship with psychology. The point I'm trying to make here is that these facts must have been the reasons that inspired early Muslim scholars to study human psychology. And that is why, if we look at Muslim heritage, we will see that Muslim psychologists have written on a number of, on different aspects of human psychology. If you take the book of Ibn al-Qayyim, for example, Tuhfatul Awlad, Tuhfatul Ahkam, Tuhfatul Awlad, Tuhfatul Mawdud, Bi Ahkam al-Mawlud, you would see the way he gave perfect description of the biological basis of human behavior, how man is actually created, details, as if modern biology hasn't left any, hasn't produced anything new. Now, the same thing if you take other scholars. If you take Imam al-Ghazali, for example, he has written on human cognitive development. The same thing Al-Mawardi, the same thing other scholars, and Al-Balkhi, as has been constantly repeated. Then on issues of mental health, take, for example, Ighasatul Lahfan. Take, for example, the book written by Ibn Rajab, Zammul Waswas. Take, for example, Talbisu Iblis by Ibn al-Jawzi, and all other Muslim scholars, you can see that they must have been inspired and motivated by the fact that the Quran has given descriptions of human psychological tendencies in different ways. But then the most important thing, however, is that it's not about the fact that the Quran inspired early Muslim scholars. It's not about the fact that the Quran motivated them. It's about the fact that the Quran has given us factual description of human psychological tendencies. The Quran has provided a basis for us for studying human psychology. And then actually the Quran has given us not only just mere descriptions, but it has given us, a paradigm, a philosophical framework within which we should study not only man, but all other natural phenomena. What is that? The Quran laid the foundation for scientific methodology. This scientific methodology that I criticize as being reductionist, because it only stopped at the senses and human reasoning, which have been affirmed by the Quran. Allah says, Wallahu akhrajakum min butuni ummahatikum la ta'lamuna shay'an wa ja'ala lakum as-sam'a wal absara wal af'idata la'allakum tashkurun. In this verse and the several verses like this, Allah has recognized the efficacy of human senses in acquiring knowledge. Allah has recognized the efficacy of human reasoning in acquiring knowledge or interpreting knowledge. But then the Quran doesn't stop at that. Human senses and human reasoning cannot be enough to lead man to the actual truth. Man has to rely on revelation. That is why the Quran makes it clear that all knowledge is from Allah. وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. Now, modern science in its entirety and modern psychology in particular do not recognize this dimension of revelation. This وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا عَلَّمَ الْإِنسَانَ مَا لَمْ يَعْلَمْ. This dimension is dismissed. That is why in modern psychology and in modern science, no reference would be made to revelation. But as far as we're concerned, we've primarily referred to revelation as the beginning of our own study of natural phenomena. And then, like the Quran has invited us to use our senses. When the Quran says, أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ وَإِلَى السَّمَاءِ كَيْفَ رُفِعَتْ. The Quran is inviting us to use our senses to observe nature, to study natural phenomena with our senses. And then when the Quran talks of fu'ad, it is referring to our rationality, our reasoning. We interpret what our senses, perceive from natural phenomena or from the environment with our reasoning. But then it doesn't stop at that. If it stops at that, then man may fall into a number of errors, even though he may arrive at certain facts by chance and by, for example, tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then whatever man gets from this must be referred to revelation. And that is why the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam are not just necessary, they are the starting point, they are our primary source, and we must always refer to them in our study of human psychological tendencies and all other things. Now, this, in a nutshell, is about the textual foundations of psychology. We cannot go beyond this. This is just in brief. Now, what about the historical development of psychology in Nigeria? I have identified, or I have made out 3 outlines. First, indigenous and foreign inspirations to the study of psychology. Second, the trailblazers and pace setters in Islamic psychology in Nigeria. And third, an overview of the accomplishments that have been made in psychology, Islamic psychology in Nigeria. Now, talking about indigenous and foreign inspirations, I particularly, and that is as far as I could know, I particularly made reference to the writings of the Sokoto Jihad leaders, the Sokoto Caliphate leaders, most especially Sheikh Usman bin Fodio himself. He wrote on Tasawwuf, which you can call moral and spiritual psychology. He wrote on, akhlaq, which is also going together with Tasawwuf, that is ilm suluk, which is about moral psychology. And he wrote on what I call political psychology. He touched aspects of what I call political psychology in his book, Bayan Wujub al-Hijra, where he described human behaviors, based on certain descriptions of behaviors of different forms of animals like the fox, the dog, the lion, the horse, the ox, the sheep, the goat, and so on and so forth, warning leaders to be aware of, human beings that come to them, people that come to them. Some may have the behavior of a dog, others may have the behavior of a fox, another may have the behavior of an ox, some other person may have the behavior of a horse. And he went on to describe the different psychological, tendencies of these animals and how some people typically behave in the way these animals behave. I call it, political psychology, and you can as well call it comparative psychology. But another book that is very important, written by Sheikh Ramfodo, is Hisnul Afham, Min Jiyushil Awham. That is protecting minds from the assaults of illusions. This is another important book that has a lot of psychological, resources in it, which was written by him. Then the rest of the other Sokoto Caliphate scholars also wrote, but I will particularly mention a book written by Sultan Muhammad Bello, Nuskhun Kafun, which I consider it as a book that can go for social psychology. He discusses about friendship and the kind of friends that you should keep and how peers influence their peers and so on and so forth. And, the kinds of tendencies that you need to observe in a person that you will befriend. And, this, I call it can also be aspects of moral psychology, but particularly I see it as an aspect of social psychology. Now, this may be some of the, historical, that is indigenous antecedents or motivators to some of us that got interested in the psychology. About the foreign motivators or inspirations, I would particularly and first and foremostly mention the book that, the first book perhaps by Professor Malik Badri, The Dilemma of Muslim Psychologists. As far as I know, this is the first book we got in Nigeria when I was a student, undergraduate student in the 80s. This book came into Nigeria in the early 80s and we got it. It greatly influenced us. It had great impact on us. Even our lecturers that influenced us to venture into Islamic psychology must have been influenced by these books. But then, very importantly, the proceedings of the 1977 Conference on Islamic Education in Makkah al-Mukarramah, the proceedings, especially the edition that was edited by Ismail Raji al-Faruqi, that is Social and Natural Sciences, the Islamic Perspective. This has had great influence on many of us because therein there is a chapter on Islamic psychology by Professor Abdul Hamid. Then there are other chapters like Islamic approach to sociology, Islamic approach to political science, all in these chapters. All this put together inspired us actually to start working on, developing interest in Islamic psychology. And some of our colleagues in Islamic approach to political science, Islamic approach to economics, and other things. Now, after this, the persons that I know, because I don't know what is happening in other parts of the country, Nigeria is so big. I particularly know of the universities here in northern Nigeria, and most especially my own university. Of course, if it had happened in other places, we would have seen the papers and articles written by other scholars on Islamic psychology. But as far as I know, the pace setters are my two professors, Professor Maywada and Dr. Musa Ahmad. These were the people that I know that started writing on human psychology from the Islamic perspective. And they were the people that actually mentored me in particular. And so I know, especially Dr. Musa Ahmad Rahimahullah, both of them are late. They have both died. May Allah have mercy on them. Musa Ahmad had written a book or two books on Islamic psychology, Introduction to Islamic Psychology and Health and Healing in the Quran. And Professor Maywada had written several papers on Islamic psychology. And then I ventured into it. I first undertook my master's. When I came to write my master's thesis, I made sure that I did it on Islamic perspective of psychology. So my master's thesis is, the title is the study of Islamic perspective to cognitive development, a study of the Islamic perspective of cognitive development. I studied human cognition and its developmental stages from the Islamic perspective. I was able to extract about 9 stages of stages of Islamic cognitive development, besides or different from the Piagetian, but there are some similarities. But I especially look at Quranic verses and a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and based on them, I extracted the different stages from conception to birth, from birth to early childhood, and so on and so forth, up to senescence, that is old age, synthesizing Quranic verses that gave us, different descriptions of certain stages of human development. My paper has been published in the Revelation and Knowledge in IUM, for people that may be interested in maybe seeing these 9 stages of cognitive development and how through synthesis of Quranic verses and ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, I was able to come up with these 9 stages. وَالتَّوْفِيقُ مِنَ اللَّهِ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى. Now, some of us continued to be working on Islamic psychology, and so far as I know, of all the universities in Nigeria, it is only in Bayero University that we have a course at the undergraduate level, at the master's level, and at the PhD level. At the undergraduate level, it is Introduction to Islamic Psychology. I developed the course outline, that is the curriculum, and it was vetted by my 2 professors whom I mentioned, and it was approved at the departmental level, and students have been offering this course for the last 20 years at undergraduate level. Now, the same course was developed further and is being offered at the master's level and at the PhD level. And a number of students have tried in their own way to write their master's thesis or their PhD thesis from the Islamic perspective. I don't want to talk so much about myself. I will not have to mention all the papers that I wrote, but I should say that my PhD thesis was on stress-induced depression. And I dedicated some aspect of the thesis in explaining the Islamic explanation of depression, of stress and stress-induced depression, and how stress-induced depression could be, could be cured or healed from the Islamic perspective, from verses of the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and with reference to some other scholars that I referred to. So these are some of the things that I can say. However, other accomplishments that have been made as far as Islamic psychology is concerned can be either described from individual perspective, which I have just done, and from institutional perspective. And the institutional perspective is what I have stated regarding the introduction of Islamic perspective of psychology in our undergraduate and postgraduate levels of study. However, it needs to be stated that Bayero University has a number of federal colleges of education that are affiliated to it. And these colleges of education that are affiliated to it adopt the curriculum of the education department of Bayero University, Kano. Therefore, all these colleges that are degree offering colleges are also teaching Islamic psychology in their respective colleges. So you can now say that this particular course of Islamic psychology is being taught in a number of federal colleges that are all affiliated, about 10 of them that are all affiliated to Bayero University, Kano. One other thing is that it does not just stop at at psychology. This introduction of this particular course of Islamic psychology also led to the introduction of the Islamic perspective of guidance and counseling. This is at the postgraduate level. At the postgraduate level, in my department, there is a course, Islamic perspective of guidance and counseling, and contribution of Muslim scholars to counseling. These are two courses. And at the master's level, there is another course on counseling in Islam. So these are some of the things that we're doing in Nigeria so far. I think I cannot say more than that. You can see, Seyed Jamaluddin, we haven't gone far as Nigeria is concerned. We haven't gone far on issues of, especially mental health, counseling, and healing. And as you people have gone far, we are not yet there. And but however, we're trying to mentor some students and treading this path with this international students of Islamic psychology. Inshallah, when we come together and with this kind of interactions, we will develop further, inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala, and we'll develop this practice in Nigeria and in West Africa in general by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, from the institutional perspective, I must mention the role that has been played by the IIIT. The IIIT has played great roles. Although all these efforts I have mentioned are just restricted to Bayero University, Kano, and its affiliates, but I must say that the IIIT has organized a number of, seminars and conferences on Islamic psychology at different times in a number of universities. Some I went and made presentation, others were presentations that were made by others. But the only thing is that in most of the universities where such conferences or seminars were conducted, there haven't been efforts. There haven't been efforts at ensuring that those universities and those departments especially, introduce a course on Islamic psychology. And I think this is an effort that we need to take seriously. We must take this seriously and try to make serious advocacy of ensuring that at least a course, introductory course on Islamic psychology is introduced in some of these universities. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I am sorry for my incoherent presentation. I'm glad for this opportunity, but I am also particularly and especially glad to be associated with the Islamic students, international students of Islamic psychology. Thank you so much, Seyed Jamaluddin. Thank you, Abdulaziz. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.
Jazakumullah khairan. We are very grateful for this presentation, especially expositions on the textual evidences, and how you have related many of these verses of the Quran with psychology. Of course, we're very much interested in your presentation that you mentioned that has been published in IUM. They're very good for us to learn from it. And also, I would like to ask, I think, okay, as you have said, you've limited your development of Islamic psychology to what you know about in northern region. So we'll be looking at if there's anything going on in the southwest, if you know at all, and if you know anything about the scholars from the old scholars, maybe the likes of Adam al-Ilori. If you heard anything about them in the past that they've written something in psychology generally, I would like to ask Prof.
Well, I have read some of the writings of Sheikh Adam al-Ilori, but I must say that most of his writings are on the development of Arabic and Islamic education in Nigeria. So especially the history of Islamic education at Ta'aleem al-Islami and at Ta'aleem al-Arabi, that is Islamic education and Arabic education, schools that were established, books written by scholars, and Arabic, the state of Arabic literature, the history of Arabic literature in Nigeria. These are some of the things I have come across in his writings. I haven't come across any of his writings that is directly or indirectly related to psychology. I wouldn't know.
Thank you.
Actually, I have not come across it, but I'm not dismissing that he may have had written on that. I'm not aware. Wallahu ta'ala alam.
This is a platform to bring in this kind of discussions.
We do interact with with scholars from universities in the Southwest, especially through the IIIT. Okay. We have had a number of conferences together. We have had a number of seminars together with many professors from the Southwest. I have not been able to lay my hand on any work that was done by any professor from the Southwest who had written Islamic psychology. Maybe some of them had written, and those things have not been published, or they have been published in local journals that we have never had access to. So that is why I only limit myself to what I know. But this is the true situation of things.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Yeah, brothers and sisters, so if we have questions that we would like to ask Professor, the question and answer section is open for us to ask questions, please.
I just wanted to say something, Brother Abdulaziz. Professor Salisu, thank you so much for your excellent lecture. I speak for all the participants and myself. I'm sure that we hope to host you many times in the future, inshallah, both internationally and also in the regional chapter of ISIP West Africa. So thank you so much. It was very, I learned a lot from your excellent presentation. And we would love to come in touch with IIIT in West Africa as well, Professor Salisu. So if you have any direct link to them, we will be honored to be in touch with them as well, and to be in touch with your university and your excellent works as well. So just wanted to thank you once more for taking your time. Precious time.
Can I cut in here?
Yeah, please.
Can I cut in here?
Yeah, please. Please go ahead, Prof.
I want to talk about the IIIT West Africa office.
Okay, go ahead.
I will to humbly state to you that, it has been said in my introduction, I was the coordinator, the national coordinator of IIIT for more than 10 years. And now the West Africa Regional Office has been created, and I'm part of it. Right now, as I'm speaking to you today, this Sunday, we are now completing what we call the winter school, the West Africa Winter School. This is a kind of course that we conduct for about 10 days across the entire Anglophone West Africa. There are 5 centers this year. One is in Kano, one is in Lagos, one is in Kumasi, Ghana, and the other one is in Monrovia. I went to Monrovia. Last week, Sunday, by this time, I was making my presentation in Monrovia, and I returned. So I am very much related, or I'm part of the IIIT West Africa Regional Office. And therefore, we have a direct link with the IIIT West Africa Regional Office. What I would only want us to know is for ISIP, that is International Institute of Islamic Psychology, to perhaps write formally expressing interest for collaborating with the IIIT West Africa. We come into a collaboration and we can organize things jointly. In fact, inshallah, in actual fact, if we collaborate with ISIP, we should be able to organize a number of lectures and conferences across the entire West African sub-region. Our only predicament is the Francophone West Africa. We in Nigeria are Anglophone, and most of us do not speak French. And so that is why our activities are limited to the Anglophone West Africa.
Professor Salisu, I think we lost your connection.
Had visits to a number of Francophone countries, and we conducted activities there. But these have not continued. Maybe okay. I think I have made the point. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor, for highlighting.
Are you with me now?
And we really would love to be in touch with the Francophonic speaking parts of West Africa as well. That's very important for us. So inshallah, we will have that intention. We will write a formal letter to IIIT and send it to you, Professor. I will speak with Brother Abdulaziz and Brother Fatoussi and Sister Hanifat and the rest of the West African team as well, inshallah. I also want to just tell you, Professor, that we're planning to do an introduction course of Islamic psychology. This will be a collaboration between ISIP and our research center, Al-Balkhi Institute. And we will love if you can be one of the guest lecturers there. So we will speak with you about that. That will be such an honor. As connected to what you were referring to in your excellent presentation, this is one of our intentions, inshallah. So yes, I'm just going to let all the audience ask their questions. Thank you so much once more, Professor Salisu. Please, dear brothers and sisters, rounds of applause to Professor Salisu for his excellent presentation. We're truly honored to learn from his amount of knowledge, inshallah. If you have any questions, brothers and sisters, if you can just mute your microphone. Could you mute your microphone, please? Brother Osman, could you mute your microphone, please?
Okay.
Thank you. What we will do right now, all the questions that you guys have, please write them in the chat or raise your hands, your digital hands, and Brother Abdulaziz will address them so that you will be able to ask your questions to Professor Salisu, to myself, to Brother Abdulaziz, and the rest of the excellent ISIP West African team. So we will do some Q&As, and after that, Brother Abdulaziz, you will finalize with maybe inviting people to join the West African chapter and which projects we will do moving on. We will have more lectures with Professor Salisu for sure. That's something that we definitely are looking forward to. So thank you once more for joining, brothers. And by the way, Brother Abdulaziz, we have brothers and sisters from all over the world, not only West Africa, which is an honor. So we hope that more people from all over the world will join the West African initiatives and learn from West African scholars and practitioners as well. Also, we're going to have
Seyed Jamaluddin.
Yes.
If we agree, I can make my next presentation on developmental psychology from the Islamic perspective.
Perfect.
Singly,
okay, inshallah.
just taking
I'll get in touch with you. That would be beautiful because I'm having a matter train regarding that because you touch it in your presentation, 9 stages of cognitive development. So maybe I'll discuss with you privately, inshallah, on that.
That will be great. We will love that. And also we would like to do things internationally, and we with you, Professor, and we invite all of our brothers and sisters from all over the world to join ISIP West African things and to learn from West Africa, because there's so much knowledge. So we see that we have brothers from Turkey, Syria, Singapore, sisters as well. An honor to have you with us, mashallah. You're all doing an amazing job. So any questions right now, feel free to raise them and we will discuss a little bit and then we will finalize. I had a reflection on Maslow as well, but I will take that in the end. So Brother Abdulaziz.
Okay, well, I think Brother Muhammad Halal, I think he's raising his hand. Yeah, Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khairan. Ustaz Salisu, for this lecture. I'm sorry I missed the first part, but I catch the second part. Thank you very much. Actually, I was very amazed by you mentioning some other psychology like political psychology and social psychology. Actually, this is very important because usually when we talk about Islamic psychology, they focus on mental health, like which is only one part. Yeah. But now, you know, we are seeing more branches, and we know that internationally, psychology has like about 50 branches, right? So we want Islamic to be in all these branches, actually, not only on mental health. So thank you very much for this. I just want to ask, I am part of the Arabic group of ISIP. So Alhamdulillah. We had in Arabic world some scholars who developed theories about Islamic psychology, like comprehensive theories, right? So I'm interested to know if there's also in West Africa some people who has developed a comprehensive theory from Islamic perspective, and if there's any book that we can read and maybe try to compare and contrast between the current scholars all around the Islamic world. So if you mention some names, if you have any like books, and you yourself, if you have like a theory of that, I'm interested actually to read and yeah, learn from it. Jazakumullah khair.
Yeah. Yeah, Prof. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that intervention, Muhammad. Is it Hilal or
Yes.
Hilal from Turkey? Well, actually, like I stated in my presentation, we're just trying to come up in West Africa. So there is hardly any person, and especially this triple IT activities across West Africa is taking us across the entire West African countries. And if there are some kinds of works that have been made, we will have come across it. We're just trying to come up now. And I would be glad if I would be registered in the Arabic wing of the international, because I can speak Arabic in my own little way, and I can undertake a research also in Arabic. So I would be glad to join the Arabic wing also, if it is not going to be too greedy from my own part. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Jazakumullah khairan. So I think we can pass to you some of these scholars' work, so you can read about it. And then also if something developed in West Africa, so you can pass it to us, so we can pass it to our group and maybe all around the world.
Inshallah. Inshallah. Inshallah.
May I add today that Prof, some of the references he might be referring to are not far from some of the ones you mentioned in the lecture. I mean, those of Usman Napodio books. So maybe some of these,
Okay.
which are originally written in Arabic, which is going to make
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, originally written in Arabic, sure.
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay. I think I can make them available to them, even though they are hardly available in soft copy. They are all available in hard copy, but we can find ways of getting them for them, inshallah.
Okay, next question, Brother Fatusi Abrazak. Brother Razak. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Abrazak. Okay, maybe it's trying to. Okay, Brother Abdulaziz Husseini, you can go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, assalamu alaikum.
Hello. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abdulaziz Husseini from Sokoto State, Northern Nigeria. I would like to appreciate the two presenters for doing a good work, bringing us and enlightening us this morning throughout. My question base goes like this, from both the Prof and the Seyed Jamaluddin, sorry. Well, the Islamic perspective in psychology, I think is that, I don't know whether if there are sites or there are maybe groups where people will join and know about this, because I'm just lucky to be invited by, I think, a consultant psychiatrist from Kano. If not, I will not even be aware of there's anything like this to take place. And not sure what I'm saying is that there are a lot of psychologists like me that may be interested in Islamic perspective, especially now when I had a lot of interconnection between the Quran and psychology, but lack of where to get this knowledge from is also another limitation. Like I just say, consultant, I think I would not have been here. So I'm more of asking, is there any links, other groups that maybe one can be joined, or email that you can share? Then my question, that is to Prof. Then my question to say Jamaluddin will be, okay, he started mentioning a lot of things about psychotherapy as in treatment. People like me that work clearly on mental health, I capture one of those things that he started treating OCD using prophetic ways. I think, are there books available or sites where we can find these therapies that are modernizing Islamic way? My submission. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Okay.
Should I respond?
Okay, yeah, please.
Okay, go ahead, Professor.
My simple and straightforward response to the first question is that this platform, International Student of Islamic Psychology, is a group that you can join, and from it you can be getting, materials on Islamic psychology. You can be listening to lectures on Islamic psychology. So I think, let us just say that you are welcome to this particular group, inshallah. Thank you so much.
Perfect answer. And the ISIP has a lot of resource sharing, and I'll be sharing the website as well. So from there, you can get a lot of resources that you need, inshallah. Brother Jamaluddin, we will do more justice to that, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan, Professor, for highlighting us. And thank you, Brother Abdulaziz. Thank you, Brother. I forgot your name, brother. Brother
Abdulaziz Hussein.
Abdulaziz, right?
Yes.
Brother Abdulaziz Hussein. Welcome to ISIP. We have now our West African chapter in place, so we would love if you would like to join us. Brother Abdulaziz and Brother Fatusi, Sister Hanifa, and other colleagues are at your service. We need more engaged persons like yourself, and I see that you're a mental health professional as well. Our plan is to really establish an infrastructure for those who are interested in Islamic psychology in West Africa, including Nigeria, of course. So welcome to join us. We would love to have you with us. If you also represent the organization, as Brother Abdulaziz said, we would love to partner up with your organization to do MOUs and strategic collaborations, inshallah. So feel free to connect with us. Brother Fatusi represents the Muslim Mental Health Network in Nigeria. I'm going to do a presentation for them in Islamic psychology soon, for instance, and inshallah we will do a partnership with them as well. So feel free to join us. We have access to a digital library, brother, with so many resources. I mean, you will have years to just study all of those resources. There is a lot of manuals on how you can apply Islamic psychology in your clinical practice. So I recommend that you utilize our digital library, and it's free of charge, of course. When it comes to clinical practice, my suggestion is that you read essentially, so there is a book on how to work with the OCD from an Islamic psychological point of view. I'm actually trained in it myself, so I'm doing the training and traditionally Islamically integrated psychotherapy. So this book is a very good book that you could utilize. It's written by Dr. Humayun Keshavarzi, who is part of ISIP's advisory board. He's a personal teacher of mine as well. And Dr. Khalid Al-Zamzami, who is, as Dr. Muhammad from ISIP Arabic chapter knows, Dr. Khalid is one of the leading scholars in Islamic psychology in the Arab world. They have been writing this book together with some other scholars. I recommend this book to you. So if you reach out to us, I'm happy to give you all access to how you can buy the books and how you can get access to it. But then it's also good to take some formal training in Islamic psychology. If you go to our website at isip.foundation, you can see all the universities and organizations, including ISIP, of course, who offers programs, courses, diplomas in Islamic psychology. We have a directory on ISIP's website where you can see all the organizations that are offering in the universities all over the world. Jazakallah khair.
Okay. Brother Fatusi, you have something you want to ask a question?
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Can
you hear me now?
Yes, please. You can hear
me. Jazakumullah khairan to our professor for the wonderful presentation. And likewise, to let me use this medium to appreciate our brother Seyed Jamaluddin for his presentation. My question goes to Prof. And being an academia and also being a professor of psychology, I want to know his perspective on how, Islamic psychology curriculum can be incorporated to our educational system here in Nigeria, especially, in the northern part of the country. That being said, we know that the Western psychology is well grounded, in this part of this world. So being a professor in that line and being a frontline, professor of Islamic psychology, I want to know his perspective. How, is possible? How is it possible, for us to have Islamic psychology curriculum being incorporated to our system here in Nigeria? Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you, brother. But I am glad to inform you that the road has now been opened for introducing Islamic courses that we may wish to do. The National Universities Commission has just released the new university curriculum, which it calls the Core Curriculum Minimum Academic Standard, CCMAS. The good thing about this new curriculum is that it has left 30% of the curriculum to be filled up by individual universities. That individual universities should develop courses that are, very much relevant to their own communities, to their own values, to their own visions and aspirations as universities that are located within certain communities. That those universities should fill up the 30% with courses of their interest. Therefore, this gives universities in the North the opportunity to develop Islamic-based courses, not just in Islamic psychology, Islamic economics, Islamic political science, Islamic sociology, and so on and so forth. We can use this 30% to introduce a number of courses that are Islamic based in our universities. Now, what is required is only to make advocacy. And maybe the triple IT, we should double up in this regard. But then NATAIS, for example, National Association of Teachers of Arabic and Islamic Studies, and other stakeholder organizations may need to be sensitized or may need to be, acquainted with this opportunity so that we all together stand up to sensitize Muslim academics in all universities and especially Muslim vice chancellors on the need to actually, develop Islamic-based courses from Islamic perspective and get them, introduced to the universities through the 30% window that has just been provided. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. The next person is Usman Tanimu. Please, brother, go ahead. Brother Usman Tanimu.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.
Alaikum assalam wa
I want to thank Prof. Prof is a known figure. We know Prof very well, and I know what Prof can do. Jazakallah khairan, and Brother Salahuddin and yourself. My problem is, my own concern is in line with what the other speaker just said. I'm a Nigerian, but I stay here in Uganda, and I partly lecture the Islamic University in Uganda, and where I teach psychology. I'm a psychologist and also a psychosocial counselor. I'm also an educational psychologist. But what we do here, though it's an Islamic university, is completely Western psychology. And wallahi, I have never even known of this ISIP. I have never heard of this association before. I have never known about it until just 25th of last month when somebody sent me this webinar and said I should please try to attend. So how can we also incorporate being an Islamic university? Because in Africa we are two. We have Islamic University in Uganda, and then for Francophone in Niger Republic. Then we have others in Malaysia and other places. How can we incorporate this Islamic psychology? Because wallahi, it's in fact there is no aspect it has not touched, and this is something connecting to the Holy Quran. How can we incorporate it? Because being an Islamic-based institution, how can we incorporate this into our system? And also, how can we have ISIP here in Eastern Africa? Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
I think Brother Jamaluddin would be the best to answer that question.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, brother. Thank you, Brother Usman, for your reflections and questions. With regards to East Africa, we're actually establishing an East African chapter, brother, so I would love to be in touch with you. We have a couple of sisters joining us from Kenya that are very interested. We also have from Uganda, actually. I think Professor Maimuna is here, or Dr. Maimuna, I should say. I saw her name earlier today, at least. Maybe she left.
She left at Zuhr time.
Yes,
okay.
I shared it to them. I was one that shared the link to all of them.
Yeah. So, Brother Usman, feel free to reach out to me. I will write my WhatsApp number to you here. I actually write it to everybody. So if you want to write to me personally, you can do that. So, and the email to us is contact@isip.foundation. So I'm happy to bring you to the East African chapter. We would love to have you with us to further develop. Could you, Brother Usman, could you also write your WhatsApp number to me in the chat? You can write it as a private message if you don't want to share it publicly, and I will be in touch with you. East Africa is very important, of course. And also to allude to what Professor Salisu has mentioned with regards to Anglophonic and Francophonic, we want to break the hegemony of only speaking one language when we disseminate knowledge. Of course, it should be in Arabic, everything, right? Because Arabic should be the lingua franca of Islamic thought. Now, because of colonialism, a lot of us are detached from that. I mean, I'm not even myself fluent in Arabic. I understand Arabic, but I'm not fluent. So I shouldn't say that this is just an NSCIA to myself. We need to strengthen our Arabic as an ummah, you know. And actually the Ottomans, they used to say that there's 3 languages in particular that was very important for them to understand. Islamic thought. One, of course, is always Arabic. This is the main language of Islam because the revelation came from Arabic, in Arabic, and also the Prophet ﷺ, he was Arab. So Arabic is very important. And, you know, majority of all the traditional scholarship was made in Arabic. The second language they used to say was Turkish, actually. Turkish was the language of administration. And if you want to learn a lot of Islamic psychology things, there's a lot of great manuscripts in Turkish as well. And then, of course, Farsi, because a lot of the traditional scholars also wrote in Farsi, particularly in poetry and culture, and actually also in Islamic psychology. Imam Ghazali's Kimiyat al-Sa'adat, the summary of Ihya al-Ulumuddin, was written in Persian, for instance, Farsi. Then add to that Urdu. Urdu is very important language in Islamic psychology. And add to it all the dialects that are spoken in West Africa as well. And add to it all the languages all over the world, including Bahasa Indonesia, because a lot of scholarship right now in Islamic psychology is made in Indonesia. And Bahasa is an important language as well. And also Malay in Malaysia, because Professor Badri lived in Malaysia for over 20 years. So I recommend us to speak all languages, right? And we in ISIP want to disseminate knowledge in different languages, not only in English. We actually need to do more things in Arabic, in Wolof, and Turkish, and Farsi, in Bahasa Indonesian, in Urdu, and other languages. So, Brother Usman, if you want to do things in your language, we will be more than happy. Also in Nigeria, in different dialects, also in French, because we want to reach out to our Francophonic part of the West Africa. We would love to do more things in French language as well, because all languages are from Allah, whether it's Spanish or, you know, or Swedish, you know, Allah has created everything. So this is my honest opinion that we should do more things in different languages. And right now, ISIP is doing lectures in English, Arabic, Turkish, Urdu, Hindi, Malayalam, Bahasa Indonesian, Bahasa Malaysian. We're starting in French and Spanish and Portuguese and in Dutch, in German, etc. So we will love to do more things in these languages as well. I also saw a question in the chat, brother, from Sister Zina. Shall I just answer it quickly? She's asking, is there a trauma-informed care Islamic perspective curriculum? Yeah. So this is a very important question, Sister Zina. I don't know which country you're from, but in ISIP right now, we're establishing a task force which will work on trauma. And we actually had a lecture with Dr. Omar Rida from Libya and US maybe a month ago, where we were speaking about trauma. So trauma is a very important topic. I actually, soon I will release an article that I wrote together with two colleagues, Dr. Yusuf and Sister Fatima, about how to work with trauma from an Islamic psychological point of view. Happy to share more information about that article as well. But we will love if you would like to join this task force, and then we can work together to establish more work in this. So feel free to write your WhatsApp number as well, and I will be in touch with you, sister. Okay, you're from the United States, so most welcome. We also have a North American chapter, Sister Zina, with a lot of members from US and Canada doing an amazing job. Many of the leading scholars in Islamic psychology in this contemporary era are from US, actually, like Dr. Human, Dr. Abdullah Ratman, Dr. Rani Awad, Dr. Omar Rida, Dr. Amber Haq, and many other scholars. So most welcome, sister, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Professor, you wanted to say something? Maybe after Professor, we can close the session, inshallah.
Yeah. Well, I actually wanted to comment on that question by Dr. Usman Kanimu from Uganda. I want to mention that I have been in talk with the rector of the Islamic University in Uganda, Professor Ismail Jagenda, and we've been talking about the possibility of engaging me as a visiting lecturer on Islamic psychology. They will introduce Islamic psychology, and I can be lecturing maybe even if virtually. So maybe with this question, because I was thinking that there is a course on Islamic psychology in IUIU. I'm surprised that there is none. So maybe I will have to talk to him further, inshallah, and so that we try to be more serious about it until it leads to fruition, inshallah. Thank you so much, and we can keep in touch. You can see my contacts on the slide. You can get across to me, and then we talk. And then Sister Maimuna also, I have been in touch with her. We'll discuss this, maybe the three of us, myself, yourself, and Sister Maimuna, Dr. Maimuna, we can talk about it and see how this is actually implemented, inshallah.
Inshallah, sir. Jazakallah khair, sir.
Okay, brothers and sisters, we are very grateful and we thank our speakers, Professor Salisu and Brother Jamaluddin, for joining us. Of course, we want to have you again, maybe for the second stage of this presentation, especially again with Professor Salisu. So we've already stayed long enough, so I will just be ending this meeting with a closing remark, except if Brother Jamaluddin has something to say before giving a closing remark. But before then, for updates, please, you can always join the WhatsApp group and you can please register so that when we have your email, we can send you the slides, inshallah. So please, I'm going to send you this registration link. Again, I've been sending it. Try to click the link, register your names and your email. I will get in touch, inshallah. So if you have any other things you think you can advise us about, we have West Africa at ISIP Foundation, and you can join the WhatsApp group. You get updates for next events. And also, if you want any other information, it's easy to always send that on WhatsApp, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Abdulaziz. I just want to thank you once more for hosting in such an eloquent way. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your excellent khidmah. I want to thank the whole ISIP West African team, Brother Fatusi, Sister Hanifat, and rest of the team for the excellent work. I want to thank Professor Salisu as our Murabbi and teacher. Thank you, Professor, for being so generous with us and giving so much of your time. We've been here now for over 2 hours. MashaAllah, may Allah bless you, bless your family, bless your deeds. We're honored to be your students and we're honored to disseminate your knowledge, inshallah. And thank you all participants, all excellent brothers and sisters for joining us. Please forgive me personally for any shortcomings from my side, whether in my presentation or anything else. And rest assured that all the good, if anything has come from this, is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all the mistakes are solidly mine. We're looking forward to establish the West African chapter. And I also want to remind all of us who are not from West Africa, West Africa is the core of Islamic thought. West Africa is the center of Islamic thought. We as non-West Africans, we need to learn from our West African brothers and sisters, and also the tradition of Islam, because we have a tendency to sometimes think that Islam is mainly Middle East or Islam is mainly Asia. You know, we have this tendency to forget that some of the biggest Muslim countries are in the African continent and specifically in West Africa. This is due to colonialism, dear brothers and sisters. The colonial narratives is still sometimes internalized within ourselves, and we need to first and foremost decolonialize ourselves in order to resettle ourselves in Islamic psychology, because the decolonial psychology has affected us a lot. And I'm doing a lecture on Wednesday for ISIP Italian chapter about decolonial psychology. We will share it in all of our WhatsApp groups, including the ISIP West African WhatsApp group. You're more than welcome to join, because one of my interests besides Islamic psychology is decolonial psychology. And when we look at decoloniality, we understand that we are still affected as Muslims. We're not immune. So we need to decolonialize. And one of the decolonial factor is that actually Islamic thought was centered in many different parts of the world, not only in Middle East, not only in Asia, actually also in Africa, and particularly in West Africa. We need to understand that Timbuktu was and is still the center of Islamic thought in the whole Islamic world. And this is why it's so important for us as non-West Africans to learn from our West African scholars like Professor Salisu and brothers and sisters like Brother Abdulaziz, because West Africa is the core of Islamic thought, core of Islamic civilization. Many of our excellent traditional scholars came from West Africa. Many of our excellent contemporary scholars come from West Africa. And we want to learn from West Africa. We want to disseminate the Islamic knowledge of West Africa to the rest of the Ummah. And we want to strengthen the infrastructure of how we can normalize Islamic psychology within the West African context. That's why ISIP is at the service for all of our brothers and sisters in West Africa and in the whole African region, continent, and all over the world. Because we have so much to learn from Nigeria, from Ghana, from Malaysia, from Indonesia, from India, Pakistan, from Saudi Arabia, from Qatar, from Egypt, from Morocco, from Bosnia, from Turkey, from Iran, from Afghanistan, from Kenya, from Uganda, rest of the world. We want to work with you guys. We're looking forward to do more programs, to courses with all of you, to collaborate with universities and update yourself, because we're doing now courses. We're establishing a research center. We're collaborating with different universities, doing programs and courses. So there's a lot of things going on. So this is for me. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for all of your excellent questions. And we will continue to learn from you. And welcome to the West African chapter. Join the West African chapter so we can further develop more initiatives for brothers, for sisters, for mental health professionals, supervision groups, halaqas, reading clubs, etc. Professor Salisu, thank you once more. Would you like to say anything? And would you like to do a closing dua for us, Professor Salisu, inshallah? That will be such an honor.
You read my mind.
All right, so Alhamdulillah, I have nothing to say, but to once again, thank you people for the opportunity. I hope we will get more opportunities, inshallah, in the future to benefit ourselves and to benefit our brothers and to benefit the Ummah, inshallah. So, sallu ala nabi al-kareem, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim. وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor
We'll end this
Salisu.
program, so everyone is free to go now.
Jazakallah khairan. Abdulaziz, thank you, brother. Amazing facilitating your work. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for joining. Professor Salisu, I'm looking forward to meet you in Nigeria. I want to come and visit you, inshallah. We can do international
Inshallah,
Nigeria.